They say that memory has a texture. For me, it felt like the rough wool of an old coat, or the smooth, cool surface of a silver thimble. I sat in the armchair by the window, the one that still smelled faintly of my late husband's tobacco, and pulled the needle through the fabric one last time. My fingers were stiff. The arthritis had been flaring up all week, a dull ache that throbbed in rhythm with the ticking clock on the mantelpiece. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The thread was gold. It was a stark contrast against the patchwork of the quilt draped over my knees. This wasn't just a blanket, it was a map of a life. I ran my hand over the squares. Here, a piece of blue velvet cut from the onesie Jason wore when I brought him home from the hospital. Next to it, a square of sturdy denim from the knees of the first pair of jeans he tore climbing the oak tree in the backyard. There was a scrap of white satin from his prom sash, and a piece of grey flannel from his first grown-up suit. 32 years of history, stitched together by a mother's trembling hands. There, I whispered to the empty room, it's done. I bit the thread and knotted it. My eyes felt heavy. I had been awake for nearly 20 hours, driven by a singular, frantic purpose. Tonight was Christmas Eve. Tonight, I would see him. I folded the quilt carefully. It was heavy, substantial. It felt like a hug that lasted forever. I wrapped it in brown paper, tying it with a simple red ribbon. It didn't look like the gifts you see in department store windows. It didn't sparkle. It didn't scream money. It whispered love. And that was the problem, wasn't it? I stood up, my knees popping in protest. I walked to the kitchen, where the second part of my offering waited. The tin box was dented and old. The painting of Santa Claus on the lid faded to a ghostly white. But inside lay 24 butter cookies, baked from my grandmother's recipe. The kitchen still smelled of vanilla and toasted almonds. Jason used to steal these when they were still hot. He would burn his tongue and laugh, blowing air out of his mouth like a little dragon. "Mom, you make the best magic in the world," he used to say. I wondered if he still remembered that magic. I wondered if he still remembered me. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back was 60 years old, but she looked older tonight. My grey hair was pulled back in a loose bun, wisps of it escaping to frame a face etched with lines of worry. I wore my heavy wool coat, the charcoal one I had bought 10 years ago. It was warm, sensible, and completely out of fashion. I could have worn something else. I looked at the closet door. Behind it, hidden in garment bags, were coats made of cashmere and silk, coats that cost more than most people's cars. I knew exactly how much they cost, because I had paid for them without blinking. I was Mary Henderson. To the world, I was just an old widow living in a modest house on the edge of town. But on paper, in the ledgers locked in my attorney's safe, I was the silent owner of half the commercial district downtown. My husband, bless his cautious soul, had left me land, acres of it. And I had been smart. I hadn't sold, I had developed. But Jason didn't know. He didn't know about the portfolio. He didn't know about the millions. To him, I was just Mum, the woman who clipped coupons, the woman who drove a 15-year-old sedan, the woman he had slowly, painfully outgrown. I wanted it that way. I wanted him to love me, not my bank account. I wanted to see his eyes light up when he saw me, not when he saw a check. Tonight was the test. I picked up the heavy package and the cookie tin. I walked to the front door and hesitated. The wind was howling outside. The weather forecast had warned of a blizzard, the worst in a decade. My hand hovered over the phone. I could call a car. I could call a private driver to take me to his doorstep in a heated Mercedes. It would be so easy. No. If I showed up in a luxury car, he would ask questions. He would look at the car, not the quilt. He would ask where I got the money, and the lesson would be lost. I needed to arrive as his mother. Just his mother. I opened the door and stepped out into the biting cold. The wind hit me like a physical blow. Snow swirled in chaotic patterns, stinging my cheeks. I pulled my scarf tighter and locked the door behind me. My boots crunched on the frozen path. I walked to the bus stop 3 blocks away. The street lights were halos of orange in the white blur. The neighbourhood was quiet, windows glowing with the warm light of family gatherings. I felt a pang of loneliness so sharp it almost brought me to my knees. I missed my husband. I missed the noise of a full house, but mostly I missed the little boy who used to wait by the window for Santa. The bus arrived 10 minutes late, a heaving beast of metal and light cutting through the storm. I climbed on, struggling slightly with the heavy package. The driver, a tired-looking man with dark circles under his eyes, nodded at me. "Merry Christmas, Mum," he grunted. "Merry Christmas," I replied, my voice raspy. The bus was nearly empty. A few late workers, heads bowed against the windows, a teenage couple holding hands in the back, sharing a pair of earphones. I sat near the front, hugging the package to my chest to keep it warm, and as if the cold could damage the memories inside. The ride took 40 minutes. We moved from the modest streets of my neighbourhood through the darkened industrial district and finally began the climb toward the heights. The heights, even the name sounded like a judgment. This was where Jason lived now. He and Lisa had rented a sprawling villa there 2 years ago. It was a place of high gates, manicured hedges, and silence, the kind of silence that money buys. I watched the city change through the fogged-up window. The houses grew larger, pushing away from the street as if they were afraid of the common people walking by. The Christmas lights here were different. They were uniform, tasteful white LEDs strung with mathematical precision. There were no inflatable snowmen, no mismatched colours. Everything was perfect. Everything was cold. The bus stopped at the bottom of the hill. "Last stop, ma'am," the driver said, looking at me in the rear-view mirror. "You sure you want to get off here? It's a hike up to the residential area." "I'm sure," I said, forcing a smile. "My son lives just up the road." "All right. Be careful out there. It's slick." I stepped off onto the pavement. The bus doors hissed shut, and the vehicle pulled away, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust and snow. Now it was just me and the storm. I looked up the winding road. The snow was falling harder now, thick flakes that stuck to my eyelashes. I adjusted my grip on the quilt and started to walk. My boots were sturdy, but the snow was deep here. The ploughs hadn't come through yet. Every step was a battle. My breath came in short, white puffs. Left foot, right foot. Don't stop. I thought about Jason. I thought about the last time we spoke, 3 months ago. It had been a brief phone call. He sounded rushed, stressed. "I'm busy, Mum," he had said. "Lisa and I are planning a big holiday party. Important clients. I'll try to squeeze you in next week, okay?" Next week never came. I didn't blame him. He was chasing his dreams. I was proud of him. He was a financial analyst, climbing the corporate ladder with a hunger that terrified me sometimes. He wanted to be someone. He wanted to belong in this world of white lights and high gates. And Lisa, she was the perfect partner for that climb. Beautiful, sharp, and ambitious. She looked at me the way one looks at a stain on a silk tablecloth, something to be removed, or at least hidden. I shook my head, scattering snow from my hat. I shouldn't think uncharitable thoughts on Christmas Eve. Lisa was his wife. She made him happy. That was all that mattered. The wind picked up, screaming through the pine trees that lined the road. My fingers, even inside my gloves, were starting to go numb. The package felt heavier with every step. Why am I doing this? The question whispered in the back of my mind. I could be home. I could be drinking hot cocoa by the fire. I could be reading a book. Because he is your son, my heart answered. Because you are the only one who remembers who he really is. I reached the main gate of the community. A security guard sat in a small heated booth. He looked up, surprised to see a woman walking out of the blizzard. I approached the window. He slid it open, a blast of warm air hitting my frozen face. "Can I help you, ma'am?" He looked suspicious. I didn't blame him. I must have looked like a vagrant, covered in snow, clutching a brown paper package and a battered tin box. "I'm here to see Jason Henderson," I said, my teeth chattering. 24 Oakwood Drive. The guard looked down at his clipboard. "Is he expecting you?" I'm his mother," I said. "It's a surprise." The guard frowned. He looked me up and down. I saw the judgment in his eyes. He saw the old coat. He saw the lack of a car. "I can't just let people in, Ma'am. Protocol." "Please," I said, and I hated how desperate my voice sounded. "It's Christmas Eve. I just want to drop off his gifts. I walked all the way from the bus stop." He hesitated. He looked at the storm raging behind me, then back at my face. Humanity won over protocol. "All right," he sighed, "but I have to log you in." "ID?" I fumbled with frozen fingers to get my wallet out. I showed him my driver's license. He glanced at it, typed something into his computer, and the heavy iron gates began to swing open. 24 Oakwood is the third house on the left, he said. "Stay on the sidewalk. The plows might come through." "Thank you," I whispered. I walked through the gates. The wind seemed less violent here, blocked by the massive hedges and walls. I counted the houses. 1, 2, and then I saw it. Number 24. It was a magnificent house, a modern colonial with tall pillars and huge bay windows, and it was alive. Light poured from every window, spilling out onto the pristine snow of the lawn. I could hear music, just smooth and sophisticated. I could hear the murmur of voices, the clinking of glass, the sound of laughter. There were cars parked all along the circular driveway, BMWs, Audis, Teslas, shiny, sleek machines that cost more than I spent in a year. I stopped at the edge of the driveway. Suddenly, I felt very small. My gift, the handmade quilt, felt ridiculous. My cookies, in their dented tin, felt like a joke. What was I doing here? This was a party. A sophisticated high society party, and I was just Mary. I looked down at my boots. They were muddy from the trek. My coat was damp. My nose was running. I turned to leave. I actually turned my body back toward the gate. Fear, cold and gripping, seized my chest. I didn't belong here. I was an embarrassment. But then I saw him. Through the large bay window in the living room, I saw Jason. He was holding a glass of wine, wearing a tuxedo. He looked handsome, so incredibly handsome. He threw his head back and laughed at something a man next to him said. It was the same laugh he had when he was 5 years old, and I tickled his tummy. The fear vanished, replaced by a surge of maternal longing so powerful it warmed my blood. That was my boy, and I had a gift for him. I squared my shoulders. I wiped the snow from my face. I gripped the package tighter. I am his mother, I told myself, and I have a right to wish him Merry Christmas. I walked up the driveway, past the shiny cars, toward the massive oak front door. I didn't know it then, but I was walking toward the moment that would break my heart. I was walking toward the door that would slam shut on my past and eventually open the future. I reached the porch. I could hear the music clearly now. White Christmas was playing on a piano. I raised my hand. My knuckles were red and raw. I knocked. The sound of my knock seemed swallowed by the storm, pathetic and small against the massive oak wood. I waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. Maybe they didn't hear me. Maybe the music was too loud. I raised my hand to knock again, harder this time, but before my knuckles could touch the wood, the handle turned. It was a heavy, metallic sound, the sound of a vault unlocking. The door swung inward. Light. Blinding, golden light flooded out, hitting me with physical force. It carried the scent of pine needles, expensive cologne, and roasting turkey. For a split second, I closed my eyes, letting the warmth wash over my frozen face. Yes, can I help you? The voice was polite, clipped, and unfamiliar. I opened my eyes. A man stood there, but it wasn't Jason. He was young, dressed in a crisp white shirt and black vest. A waiter. He held a silver tray of empty champagne flutes in one hand. He looked at me, a soaking wet, grey-haired woman, clutching a brown paper package with a mixture of confusion and mild alarm. I'm looking for Jason, I stammered. My voice was hoarse. Jason Henderson. The waiter hesitated. He glanced over his shoulder at the party behind him. I could see past him now. The hallway was cavernous, with marble floors that shone like water. A crystal chandelier, massive and intricate, hung from the ceiling, casting prisms of light onto the laughing guests. It was like looking into a different world, a world where cold and hunger and loneliness didn't exist. Who is it struggling at the door, Michael? A woman's voice floated toward us, high-pitched, commanding. Some delivery, I think, ma'am, the waiter called back, stepping aside. And then she appeared. Lisa. She looked breathtaking. She wore a floor-length emerald green gown that hugged her slender figure. Diamonds sparkled at her throat and ears. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect, glossy waves. She held a glass of white wine, her fingers manicured to perfection. She glided toward the door, a smile plastered on her face, ready to greet a late guest. Then she saw me. The smile didn't fade. It shattered. It fell off her face like a mask dropping to the floor. Her eyes widened, scanning me from my wet wool hat to my muddy boots. Her nose wrinkled slightly, a reflex, as if she smelled something rotting. Mary, she breathed. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. Hello, Lisa, I said, trying to stand taller. Merry Christmas. She didn't move. She didn't open the door wider. She stood there, blocking the entrance like a guardian of the gate. She turned her head sharply back toward the living room. Jason, she hissed. It was a sharp, urgent sound. Jason, get here, now. I heard footsteps, quick, heavy strides, and then my son appeared behind her. He looked even better up close than he had through the window. The tuxedo fit him perfectly, broadening his shoulders. He looked powerful, successful. But the moment his eyes landed on me, that power evaporated. His face drained of colour, his jaw dropped. For a second, I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. I saw vulnerability. I saw panic. Mom, he whispered. Hi, honey, I said, stepping forward. I wanted to surprise you. The movement broke his trance. He didn't step back to let me in. Instead, he stepped forward, crossing the threshold onto the porch, and pulled the door almost shut behind him, leaving only a sliver of light. He stepped out into the freezing wind with me, in just his tuxedo. He didn't seem to feel the cold. He was burning with something else. What are you doing here? His voice was low, a frantic whisper. He looked over his shoulder at the sliver of open door, terrified that someone inside might see us. I came to bring you your Christmas gifts, I said, lifting the heavy package and the tin box. I know you were busy, but I didn't want the day to pass without seeing you." He looked at the brown paper package. He looked at the dented tin box with the faded Santa Claus. He looked at my old coat, heavy with melted snow. "Mom, look at you," he said, his voice shaking. "You're soaking wet. You look like a beggar." The word hit me harder than the wind. Beggar. "I walked from the bus stop," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "The snow is deep, but I made you a quilt, Jason, like the one Grandma made for me, and I brought the cookies." "A quilt?" He let out a short, incredulous laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone who is deeply embarrassed. "You came all the way here, unannounced, in the middle of a blizzard, to bring me a blanket." "It has pieces of your old clothes," I said, feeling foolish now. "Your baby onesie, your prom sash. Memories, Jason." He rubbed his face with his hands. "Mum, listen to me. Inside that house are the managing partners of my firm. There are investors worth millions of dollars. My boss is in there." "So?" I asked, confused. "I'm your mother. Surely your boss has a mother." "It's not about that," he snapped, then lowered his voice again, glancing at the door. "It's about image, Mom. We are trying to build a life here. We are trying to fit in, and you show up looking like this, with homemade cookies and old rags." "They aren't rags," I whispered. "They are your life." The door creaked open wider. Lisa stepped out, wrapping a fur shawl around her shoulders. She shivered theatrically. "Jason, it's freezing," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "What is going on? People are asking where you are." "She just showed up," Jason said to his wife, his tone apologetic. "I'm handling it." Lisa looked at me. Her eyes were hard, calculating. She didn't see a mother. She saw a liability. "Mary," she said, "we really can't do this right now. It's a formal event, catered, seating charts. We didn't account for extra guests." "I don't need a seat," I said. My pride was starting to crumble, but I held on to the edges of it. "I just wanted to say hello, maybe warm up for a few minutes, use the restroom, then I'll go." Lisa and Jason exchanged a look. It was a look of silent communication. A husband and wife deciding the fate of an unwanted intruder. "Mum, you can't come in," Jason said. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at a spot somewhere over my left shoulder. "What?" I asked. I thought I had misheard him. "You can't come in," he repeated, firmer this time. "Look at the floor, Mom. It's Italian marble. Your boots are covered in mud. You're dripping water everywhere. You'll ruin the foyer." "I can take my boots off," I said. "I can wait in the kitchen." "No," Lisa cut in. "The kitchen is full of catering staff. It's chaotic. You'd just be in the way." I stood there, stunned. The cold was seeping through my coat now, reaching my bones, but it was nothing compared to the chill radiating from my son. "Jason," I said, my voice trembling, "it's Christmas Eve. Are you really going to leave me outside?" He looked pained. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wasn't a monster. He was just weak. He was a boy playing dress-up in a man's world, terrified that the costume would slip. "Mom, you're being too dramatic," he said, grasping for an excuse. "Always so dramatic. You show up here to guilt-trip me. If you wanted to see us, you should have called. You should have made an appointment." "An appointment?" I echoed. "To see my son?" "Yes, that's how the world works, Mom. Successful people have schedules. We can't just drop everything because you decided to knit a blanket." He was shouting now, releasing his stress onto me. The wind howled, mixing with his angry words. "Please," I whispered. "Just 5 minutes. I'm very cold." Jason looked at the door. He could hear the laughter inside. He looked at me. He made his choice. "I can't, Mom. It would be awkward. Everyone would stare. It would ruin the night." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He fumbled with it, pulling out a wad of cash. "Here," he said, thrusting the bills at me. Take this, call a cab, go home. I'll call you next week. We'll do a proper dinner. Just the three of us. Somewhere quiet. Okay? I looked at the money in his hand. Crisp $100 bills. He was trying to pay me to leave. He was trying to buy his conscience clean. I didn't take it. I don't want your money, Jason, I said softly. Just take it, he snapped, shoving it toward my pocket. Don't be difficult. I'm trying to help you. You're not helping me, I said, finding a sudden strange calm amidst the storm. You're hiding me, he froze. The truth hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. Go home, Mary, Lisa said, turning back to the door. You're making a scene. The neighbours will see. Yeah, Jason said, backing away toward the warmth. Just go home, Mum. Please, do this for me. Do this for you, I repeated. Yes. If you love me, just go. Don't embarrass me if I love him. That was the weapon he always used, and because I did love him, because I loved him more than my own pride, more than my own comfort. I nodded. Okay, I said. Okay, Jason. Relief washed over his face. He looked like a man who had just dodged a bullet. Thanks, Mom. Thanks. I'll call you. I promise. He stepped back. Lisa was already inside. He looked at me one last time, his hand on the heavy brass handle. Merry Christmas, he muttered, and then he closed the door. Click. The sound was final. The lock turned. I was alone again. The light from the window still spilled onto the snow, but now it felt distant, unreachable. I stood on the porch, the wind whipping my hair around my face. I looked down at the packages in my hands, the quilt, the cookies. I walked slowly off the porch, down the steps. I felt numb, not just cold, but entirely hollowed out. I reached the large, decorative trash cans at the end of the driveway, hidden behind a tasteful trellis. I looked at the tin box. The cookies were getting cold. They would be stale by tomorrow. I opened the lid of the trash can. I hesitated. My grandmother's recipe. The smell of vanilla. I dropped the tin box into the darkness. It landed with a hollow clang. Then I looked at the quilt. I touched the brown paper. Underneath was the blue velvet, the denim, the white satin. I couldn't do it. I couldn't throw that away. That wasn't just fabric. It was my memory of him. Even if he didn't want it, I couldn't let it rot in the garbage. I tucked the package under my arm. It was the only thing I had left to hold on to. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were blue and stiff. I dialed a number I had memorized but never used. Sterling Private Car Service, a professional voice answered. How may I assist you? I need a car, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor that had been there moments ago. Location, 24 Oakwood Drive, The Heights. Certainly, madam. What kind of vehicle would you prefer? I looked back at the house. I saw Jason through the window again. He was back in the circle of men, laughing. He was drinking champagne. He looked relieved. He had disposed of the problem. The best one you have, I said, and send it now. We have a Maybach available, but it is at a premium rate due to the storm. I don't care about the rate, I said. Just get me out of here. I hung up. I walked to the curb and waited. I turned my back to the house. I turned my back to the light. I stood in the dark, in the snow, and I waited for the car that I could easily afford, but had never let myself enjoy. The tears didn't come. Not yet. The cold was too deep for tears. Instead, a seed was planted in my chest. A seed of ice. Jason wanted me to disappear. He wanted a mother who didn't embarrass him. He wanted a life of money and status. Fine, I thought, as the twin headlights of a long black car cut through the blizzard in the distance. If it's money you respect, Jason, then money is what you will see. He had shut the door on his mother, but he had no idea he had just shut the door on his safety net. The car pulled up, silent and sleek like a panther. The driver, a uniformed man with an umbrella, jumped out to open the rear door for me. "Good evening, madam," he said, shielding me from the snow. I slid onto the heated leather seat. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, shutting out the wind, shutting out the party, shutting out the sun who had left me in the cold. "Where to?" the driver asked. I looked at the house one last time through the tinted window. "Home," I said, and then, "tomorrow, to my lawyer." Silence is a heavy thing. In the beginning, it feels like a physical weight pressing down on your chest, making it hard to breathe. But if you hold it long enough, if you carry it with a straight back, it hardens. It becomes a shield. Christmas morning dawned grey and quiet. There were no presents under my tree. There was no wrapping paper torn to shreds on the floor. There was just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of black coffee in my hand. My phone sat on the placemat in front of me. It was silent. I knew what Jason was doing. He was probably waking up in his high thread count sheets. Lisa was probably making mimosas. They were opening gifts, expensive watches, designer bags, things that shone and sparkled. They were relieved. They were thinking, "Thank God she didn't come in. Thank God we dodged that bullet." I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter. I liked it. I stood up and walked to the hallway. The brown paper package, the quilt, was sitting on the bench where I had left it the night before. I didn't unwrap it. I didn't want to see the blue velvet or the white satin. Those fabrics belonged to a mother who believed in fairy tales. That mother had frozen to death on a porch in the Heights last night. I carried the package to the spare bedroom. I opened the large cedar chest at the foot of the bed. It smelled of wood and lavender. I placed the package at the very bottom, beneath the winter woolens and the spare linens. I closed the lid. It made a heavy, dull thud. It sounded like a coffin closing. "Goodbye," I whispered. I went back to the kitchen and picked up my phone. It was December the 25th, a holiday, but I knew the man I was about to call never really stopped working. I dialed. 1 ring, 2 rings. "Mary?" The voice was crisp, alert, but laced with genuine surprise. "Merry Christmas. Is everything all right?" "Hello, Arthur," I said. Arthur Finch had been my husband's lawyer, and then mine, for 30 years. He was a man of steel and numbers, a shark in a tailored suit, who had helped me turn my husband's land into an empire. He was also the only person on earth who knew exactly how much Mary Henderson was worth. "I apologise for disturbing you on the holiday," I said. "Nonsense," Finch replied. "I was just avoiding my in-laws by hiding in the study." "You're saving me. What do you need?" "I need to make some changes to the estate," I said. "Significant ones." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the shift in his tone from friend to counsellor. "Is this about Jason?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said, "and no. It's about me. I'm tired, Arthur. I'm tired of playing the poor widow. I'm tired of hiding." "We've discussed this," Finch said. "You chose to live modestly, to teach him the value of money. The lesson failed." I cut him off. My voice was cold, even to my own ears. "He values money, Arthur. He values it more than blood. He values it more than dignity, but he doesn't respect it. He thinks money is a costume you wear to impress people." "So, what do you want to do?" "I want to stop being a ghost in my own life," I said. "I want to review all our holdings, the commercial leases downtown, the apartment complexes, and the new acquisitions in the historic district." "The Henderson Estate project?" Finch asked. "We just closed on the last parcel of land there last month." "Yes, that one. I want to take a more active role. No more silent partner. I want to be the landlord." "Mary," Finch warned, "if you do this, your name will start appearing on documents. People will talk. Jason might find out." Let him, I said. I'm done protecting him from the truth. Very well, Finch said. I could hear the smile in his voice. He had been urging me to do this for years. I'll have the files ready on Monday morning. We have a lot of work to do. One more thing, Arthur. Yes? If Jason calls you, if he asks for a loan or a favour, or uses my name to get a table at a restaurant, yes. The answer is no. Complete cut off. He has his life. He has his salary. He doesn't get a penny from the Henderson Trust, not for a flat tyre, not for a medical bill, not for a house down payment, nothing. The silence on the other end was heavy. Finch knew what this meant. It was the nuclear option. Understood, he said softly. Are you sure, Mary? I looked out the window at the snow covering my small, modest yard. I have never been more sure of anything, I said. The weeks that followed were a blur of ink and paper. I didn't sit at home and cry. I didn't knit. I didn't bake. I bought a new wardrobe. Not flashy, but quality. Cashmere sweaters that felt like butter against my skin. Tailored trousers. A long camel hair coat that commanded respect. I cut my hair into a sharp, modern bob. I went to Finch's office every day. We sat in his glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. We moved assets. We restructured debts. We renovated 3 apartment buildings in the south side. I felt a strange, intoxicating power. For years, I had made myself small so Jason could feel big. Now, I was expanding, filling the space I actually owned. Jason, meanwhile, was following the script I had predicted. The first crack in the silence came on January 2nd. My phone buzzed. A text message. Hey, Mum. Hope you had a good Christmas. Sorry about the mix-up at the party. It was just crazy with the boss there. Let's grab lunch soon. XO, the mix-up. That's what he called, leaving his mother in a blizzard. I looked at the message. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I could type. It's okay, honey. I understand. That's what the old Mary would have done. I put the phone down. I didn't reply. A week later, a voicemail. Hey, Mum, it's Jason. Calling to check in. Haven't heard from you. Give me a call back. His voice was casual, breezy. He thought I was sulking. He thought I was playing a game of emotional chicken. He thought if he waited long enough, I would crack. I didn't call back. February came. The snow turned to grey slush. Another voicemail. This time there was a hint of annoyance. Mom, seriously, are you still mad? It's been a month. Pick up the phone. Lisa, it is asking why you're being like this. I deleted the message while sitting in a business class seat, flying to New York for a real estate conference. I ordered a glass of champagne and watched the clouds roll by below me. Lisa was asking? That was rich. Lisa was probably worried that her mother-in-law had died and the neighbours would start talking. Bad PR for the perfect couple. March 14th, Jason's birthday. This was the hardest day. Every year since he was born, I had made him a cake. Even when he moved out, I would drive to his apartment and later his house and drop off a cake and a card with a cheque inside. Not a huge cheque, but enough for a nice dinner. I sat in my hotel room in Manhattan. I had the checkbook in front of me. The habit was so strong my hand automatically reached for the pen. He's my son. It's his birthday. I closed my eyes. I saw the closed door. I saw the money he tried to shove in my pocket. He doesn't want your cake, Mary. He wants your absence. I put the checkbook away. That night, my phone rang 5 times. Jason. He was expecting the call. He was expecting the happy birthday baby. He was expecting the validation that no matter how badly he treated me, I would always be there to worship him. I let it ring. The voicemail that came later was different. It wasn't annoyed, it was rattled. Mum, it's me. It's my birthday. I thought, I don't know. Are you okay? Call me, please. I'm actually, I'm getting a little worried. I listened to it twice. I heard the fear. It wasn't the fear of losing me, it was the fear of the unknown. The reliable furniture of his life had suddenly vanished, and he was bumping into the walls in the dark. I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and familiar, but I smothered it. I wasn't punishing him. I was respecting his wish. He wanted distance. I was giving him an ocean. Spring arrived, bringing with it the manic energy of the real estate market. Mr. Finch called me into his office in late April. He looked amused. You have an interesting inquiry, he said, sliding a folder across the mahogany desk. Oh? I opened it. It was a standard application for a property viewing. Applicants, Jason and Lisa Henderson. Target property, 1422 Heritage Lane, the Henderson Estate District. I froze. Heritage Lane. It was the crown jewel of the city, a street lined with century-old Victorian mansions, cobblestone driveways, and gas-lit street lamps. It was old money. It was the kind of address that opened doors at country clubs and private schools. It was also the street my husband's grandfather had built, and 3 months ago, under the shell company MH Holdings, I had bought the controlling interest in the entire block. I owned the street. They want to buy number 1422, I asked, my voice steady. They want to see it, Finch corrected. It's listed at 2.5 million. It's significantly above their price range, Mary. I've seen their financials. They're leveraged to the hilt on their current rental and their cars. They're shopping for status, I murmured. Lisa wants the address. Precisely. They are looking to stretch. They are looking to jump into the big leagues. Finch leaned back, tenting his fingers. Normally, we would reject this application. Their debt-to-income ratio is risky. But, since the landlord is technically you, I looked at the photo of Jason and Lisa attached to the application. They looked perfect, smiling, confident, successful. The picture of the American dream. But I knew the truth. I knew about the credit cards. I knew about the need for validation that ate away at Jason like a cancer. If I rejected them, they would just find another house, another landlord. They would continue living their lie. But if I let them proceed, if I let them walk into the trap of their own ambition, let them see it, I said. Finch raised an eyebrow. Mary, they can't afford it. If they try to buy this, they will have to liquidate everything. They'll be eating ramen noodles in a mansion. I know, I said. Let them see it. And if they make an offer, accept it. You want to sell your son a house? No, I said, a small, sad smile playing on my lips. I'm not selling it to him. The company is. A blind trust. An anonymous seller. He must never know it's me. Not until the papers are signed. This is dangerous, Finch warned. If he defaults, the landlord evicts him, I said. That's how the world works, isn't it? Isn't that what he told me? Successful people have schedules, protocol. Finch looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. You've changed, Mary. I haven't changed, Arthur. I've just woken up. I went to the open house. I shouldn't have, but I couldn't resist. I wore a black wig, dark sunglasses, and a scarf wrapped high around my neck. I stood in the back of the group, pretending to examine the crown moulding in the library. Jason and Lisa were there. They were mesmerizing to watch. They moved through the house like they already owned it. Lisa was pointing out where the grand piano would go. Jason was stroking the marble fireplace, looking at it with a lust he had never shown for anything else. "It's perfect, Jace," I heard Lisa whisper. "This is it. This is who we are." "It's expensive, Liz," Jason muttered, checking his phone. I knew he was checking his bank balance. "It's a stretch." "Don't be a coward," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "Do you want to stay in that rental forever? Do you want to be a nobody? The partners live in this neighborhood. If you want that promotion, you need to look the part." Jason swallowed hard. He looked at the high ceilings. He looked at the view of the garden. He looked at the illusion of power. "Okay," he said, "we'll make it work. I'll sell the crypto. I'll borrow against the 401k. "That's my husband," Lisa beamed, kissing him on the cheek. I stood in the shadow of the hallway, my heart aching. He was going to ruin himself. He was going to gut his future to buy a stage set for his wife. I could have stepped out. I could have pulled off the wig and said, "Don't do it, son. It's not worth it. Come home. I'll make you cookies." But I remembered the snow. I remembered the door closing. He didn't want cookies. He wanted the marble fireplace. "Very well, Jason," I thought. "You want the fire. I'll let you hold the match." I slipped out the side door before they could see me. 2 days later, the offer came in. It was desperate. They offered full asking price, but with a request for a longer closing period so they could gather the funds. They were scraping the bottom of the barrel. "Do we accept?" Finch asked. "Counter offer," I said. "Counter? Mary, they are already at their limit." "I know. Ask for an all-cash deposit, 20%, non-refundable." "That's brutal," Finch said. "If they back out, they lose the deposit. That's $50,000. "They won't back out," I said. "They are drunk on the dream. They'll find the money." And they did. I don't know where they got it. Maybe Jason sold his car. Maybe he borrowed from a friend. But 24 hours later, the check arrived at Finch's office. The trap was set. The closing date was set for December the 24th. Christmas Eve. Exactly 1 year from the night he shut the door in my face. It was poetic. It was cruel. It was perfect. During those months leading up to the closing, Jason's attempts to contact me became frantic. May, "Mum, pick up. Are you sick? I'm going to call the police if you don't answer." June, I went to the house. The neighbour said, "You're travelling." "Since when do you travel?" "Where are you?" July, "Mum, we're buying a house. A huge one. On Heritage Lane. I wanted to tell you. I really need to talk to you. I'm under a lot of pressure, Mom." He wanted his sounding board back. He wanted his emotional dumpster back. He was stressed about the money, terrified of the massive debt he was taking on. And he wanted his mommy to tell him it would all be okay. But I wasn't there. I was in Paris, drinking wine by the Seine. I was in Tokyo, inspecting a new architectural design. I was living. And every time I thought about caving, every time I thought about picking up the phone, I looked at the calendar. December 24th was coming. The landlord was coming. August in the city was relentless. The heat radiated off the pavement in shimmering waves, turning the air into a thick, suffocating soup. It was the kind of weather that made people irritable, the kind of heat that melted patience and exposed the cracks in everything, including my son. I spent the late summer in the air-conditioned sanctuary of the new office space I had acquired. It was on the 42nd floor, a glass box in the sky. From here, the people down on the street looked like ants. Their struggles, their rushing, their desperate need to be somewhere else, it all looked so small. I wondered if that's how God felt, or maybe just how a landlord felt. I had become obsessed with the file on my desk, The Henderson slash or Heritage Lane acquisition. It wasn't just a real estate transaction anymore. It was a dossier on my son's life. Every document that passed through Mr. Finch's hands eventually ended up here. I saw the bank statements Jason submitted for the mortgage approval. I saw the credit checks. I saw the frantic shuffling of funds. It was a dissection of a drowning man. He had sold his Tesla. The lease was transferred to a third party in July. He had liquidated his modest stock portfolio. The tech stocks he was so proud of, gone. There was even a pawn shop receipt for a Rolex watch. I stared at that receipt for a long time. I had given him that watch for his graduation. It was engraved, "Time is yours to make. Love, Mum." He had pawned my love for $4,000 to pay for a closing fee on a house he couldn't afford. A tear leaked out of my eye, hot and angry. I wiped it away immediately. He is choosing this, I reminded myself. He is stripping himself bare to buy a costume. But watching from a distance wasn't enough. The silence between us had grown into a vast canyon, and I needed to see him. I needed to see if the reality matched the paperwork. So I did something risky. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I knew Jason's schedule. He often took clients to the Ivy, a pretentious bistro downtown where a salad cost $30 and the waiters judged your shoes. I called Finch. "Arthur," I said, "lunch, today, the Ivy." "Mary," he warned, his voice low, "that's Jason's turf. It's too dangerous." "I'm buying the restaurant next month," I lied. Well, it was a half lie. I was thinking about it. I need to inspect the service. Besides, I have a new look. He won't recognize me. It was true. My transformation was complete. The frumpy widow in the grey wool coat was gone. In her place sat a woman with a sharp, asymmetrical bob cut, wearing a tailored navy suit from Milan and oversized designer sunglasses. I looked like a CEO. I looked like money. I looked like everything Jason worshipped, and nothing like the mother he knew. We sat in a corner booth, partially obscured by a large decorative fern. It was the power spot. From here, I could see the entrance, but the entrance couldn't clearly see me. I ordered a sparkling water with a twist of lemon. My hands were shaking beneath the table. "You're playing with fire," Finch muttered, adjusting his glasses. He looked nervous. "I need to know, Arthur," I whispered. "I need to see his face." And then he walked in. My breath hitched in my throat. Jason looked terrible. Oh, he was dressed well. His suit was pressed. His tie was silk. But the man inside the suit was eroding. He had lost weight. His skin had a greyish, unhealthy pallor. There were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of expensive concealer could hide. He was walking with a client, a loud, boisterous man in a checkered blazer. Jason was laughing at the man's jokes, but the laugh was brittle. It was a performance. "Right this way, Mr. Henderson," the hostess chirped. They were seated 3 tables away from us, close enough to hear the murmur of voices, far enough to be a blur. I watched my son. I watched him order the most expensive bottle of wine on the list, even though I knew he was currently overdrawn on his checking account. "So, Jason," the client boomed, his voice carrying over the clatter of silverware, "I hear you're moving. Big upgrade, huh?" Yes, Jason said, pouring the wine with a steady hand. "We bought on Heritage Lane. Beautiful property. Historic." Heritage Lane. Wow. That's serious money, kid. You must be killing it this year. "It's been a strong year," Jason lied. He took a large gulp of wine. "We felt it was time to put down roots in a neighborhood that reflects our trajectory. Trajectory. That was his favorite word. Upward. Always upward, even if he was falling off a cliff. "And how's the family?" the client asked. "Wife, Kids. Parents. I froze. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. Jason hesitated. Just for a second. A shadow passed over his face, a flicker of genuine pain that broke through the mask. Lisa is great, he said, busy with the interior design. No kids yet. And your folks? Jason stared into his wine glass. He swirled the red liquid around, watching the vortex. My dad passed a few years ago, he said softly. Sorry to hear that. And your mum? The silence stretched. It was only 2 seconds, but it felt like an hour. She's not around, Jason said. Oh, the client said, his voice dropping to a respectful hush. I'm so sorry. I didn't know she had passed. Jason didn't correct him. He didn't say, she's alive. He didn't say, she lives 10 miles away. He didn't say, I kicked her out into a blizzard. He just nodded, a small, somber nod that accepted the condolence. Thank you, Jason whispered. It's been hard. My heart shattered. I sat there in my expensive suit in the power booth, and I felt a pain so sharp I thought I was having a heart attack. He had killed me. To save face, to avoid explaining why his mother wasn't at his fancy parties, to avoid admitting he had a rift with his family, he had simply erased me. It was easier to be the tragic son of a dead mother than the heartless son of an estranged one. Mary, Finch whispered, reaching out to touch my hand. Mary, breathe. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. I exhaled, a shaky, ragged sound. He said, I'm not around, I whispered. He let him think I'm dead. He's ashamed, Finch said. It's a defense mechanism. It's a murder, I said coldly. The ice in my chest, the ice that had started forming on Christmas Eve, suddenly hardened into diamond. Check, please, I said to the waiter who was passing by. We haven't eaten, Finch protested. I've lost my appetite. I stood up. I couldn't sit there anymore. I couldn't watch him play the grieving son while he drank wine paid for with credit card debt. I walked toward the exit. I had to pass his table. There was no other way. Finch scrambled to follow me. As I approached Jason's table, I didn't slow down. I walked with the purposeful stride of a woman who owns the building. My heels clicked on the tile floor. Click, click, click. The sound made Jason look up. Our eyes met. Time stopped. For one terrifying second, I thought he knew. I saw his eyes widen. I saw the recognition flash, the shape of my jaw, the colour of my eyes. He started to open his mouth. But then his gaze flicked to my hair, the sharp, stylish bob, then to my suit, the Gucci scarf, the oversized sunglasses. He blinked. He shook his head slightly, as if clearing a hallucination. No, I could hear him thinking. That's a rich woman. That's a powerful woman. That can't be my mother. My mother is a ghost. He looked away. He turned back to his client. Sorry, Jason said to the man. Thought I recognized someone. My mistake. I walked past him. I walked out the door and into the blinding heat of the afternoon. I stood on the sidewalk, trembling. He didn't know me, I said to Finch as he emerged behind me. You look very different, Mary. No, I shook my head. It's not the hair, it's not the clothes. He didn't recognize me because he doesn't know who I am. He never did. He only saw what he wanted to see, a servant, a bank, a burden. He never saw me. I put on my dark glasses, shielding my eyes from the sun. Proceed with the closing, Arthur, I said. No mercy. September turned to October. The leaves on the trees began to turn, painting the city in shades of rust and gold. The silence from my end remained absolute, but Jason's silence began to crack. The guilt was eating him, or maybe it was just the fear. Late one night in mid-October, my landline rang. I stared at it. Nobody called the landline anymore. I picked it up. Hello? Mom? His voice was slurred. He was drunk. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Mom, are you there? Please pick up. I know you're there. I held the receiver to my ear, my hand gripping it so tight my knuckles turned white. Mom, I'm sorry, he sobbed. It was a wet, messy sound. I'm so messed up. Everything is so heavy. I bit my lip. The mother in me wanted to scream, I'm here. Tell me what's wrong. Lisa, he hiccuped. Lisa just wants more. More furniture, more renovations. She doesn't know, Mom. She doesn't know I'm drowning. I can't tell her. She'll leave me. If I'm not successful, she'll leave me. He was crying openly now, the raw, ugly crying of a man who realizes he has built his castle on sand. I miss you, Mom, he whispered. I miss the house. I miss when things were simple. Remember the cookies? Why did I do that? I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. Tell him, a voice in my head screamed. Tell him to stop. Tell him to walk away from the house. Save him. But saving him now would only be a temporary fix. If I bailed him out, he would never learn. He would never leave Lisa. He would never find his own spine. He would just be relieved that Mommy fixed it, and in 6 months he would resent me again. He needed to hit the bottom. He needed to feel the impact. Mom, he whispered into the silence. Are you a ghost? Am I talking to a ghost? Gently, ever so gently, place the receiver back on the cradle. I cut the connection. I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I wasn't a ghost. I was the storm that was coming. November brought the cold winds back. The closing was scheduled. The paperwork was drawn up. The house on Heritage Lane, number 1422, sat empty, waiting. I went to visit it one last time before the handover. I had the keys, of course. I was the landlord. It was a magnificent beast of a house, 3 stories of Victorian grandeur, high ceilings, crown mouldings, stained glass windows. But it was cold. It had been empty for a year. It smelled of dust and old polish. I walked through the empty rooms. I imagined Jason here. I imagined him sitting in this massive living room, surrounded by expensive furniture he hadn't paid for, staring at the walls, terrified of the mortgage bill arriving in the mail. I imagined Lisa hosting dinner parties, laughing her tinkling laugh, while Jason checked his phone under the table, moving money from one credit card to another to keep the lights on. This house wasn't a home, it was a prison, and they had fought so hard to get into it. I walked to the master bedroom. It had a bay window that looked out over the street I owned. I saw a car pull up slowly outside. It was Jason's car. He didn't come in. He couldn't. He didn't have the keys yet. He just parked across the street and stared at the house. I stepped back into the shadows of the curtains. I watched him. He sat in his car for a long time. He looked small behind the wheel. He looked like a child staring at a haunted house, dared by his friends to go inside, terrified but unable to back down. Lisa was in the passenger seat. She was pointing at the house, gesturing excitedly. She was probably talking about curtains. Jason wasn't looking at the curtains. He was looking at the structure, the massive weight of it. I saw him put his head on the steering wheel. Lisa reached over and patted his shoulder. It looked like a dismissive gesture. Buck up, darling. Don't spoil the mood. He lifted his head. He started the car. They drove away. Enjoy it while you can, I whispered to the empty room, because the rent is due. The final week of November. Thanksgiving. This year there was no invite, no mix-up. They didn't even try. Jason assumed I was gone, either dead or moved away. He had accepted the narrative he told his client. I spent Thanksgiving with Finch and his family. It was warm, loud, and filled with laughter, but a part of me was missing. A part of me was at a silent table in a rented villa, where a son was eating turkey and swallowing panic. The next day, Finch came to me with the final documents. Everything is set for December 24th, he said. The seller, MH Trust, will hand over the keys at 4 o'clock p.m. at my office. Good, I said. They have requested to meet the seller, Finch said. Lisa insists on personally thanking the previous owner for accepting their offer. I laughed, a dry, humourless sound. She wants to schmooze, I said. She wants to see if the seller is someone important, someone she can add to her network. What should I tell them? Tell them the seller is a very private individual, I said. Tell them the seller will be there at the signing, but not a moment before. Mary, Finch paused. You know what will happen when you walk through that door? Yes. He might hate you forever. He already hates me, Arthur, I said, looking at the city skyline. He hates me because I'm ordinary. He hates me because I remind him of where he came from. I turned to face my lawyer. My eyes were clear. I'm going to give him a reason to respect me, and then I'm going to give him a chance to be free. Free? Free of her, I said. Free of the debt. Free of the lie. But first, the tower has to fall. I picked up the pen and signed the authorization form. Mary Henderson. The signature was bold, sweeping, and unapologetic. Let's finish this. December arrived not with snow, but with a biting, dry frost that turned the city into a landscape of grey iron. The countdown had begun. 20 days to closing. 10 days. 5. I sat in my office, watching the digital calendar on my wall. Each day that ticked by felt like the tightening of a screw. My spies, or rather the efficient paralegals at Finch's firm, kept me updated. The report on my desk was thin, but its contents were heavy. Subject, buyer financial status update. Date, December the 15th. Note, Mr. Henderson has applied for an emergency bridge loan from a high-risk lender. Interest rate 18%. Collateral, future earnings and personal assets. I stared at the number. 18%. That wasn't a loan. That was a noose. Jason was so desperate to close this deal, so desperate to secure the house on Heritage Lane, that he was signing away his future before he had even lived it. He was eating his own tail to survive. I closed the file. My hand trembled slightly. This was the moment a mother should step in. I should write a check. I should call him and scream, "Stop! You're destroying yourself." But I didn't, because if I stopped him now, he would blame me. He would say I didn't believe in him. He would say I ruined his big break. He needed to sign that paper. He needed to walk into the trap of his own free will. Only then could I set him free. 3 days before the closing. December 21st, I decided to visit the cemetery. I needed to talk to the only person who might understand what I was about to do. The grave was simple. John Henderson, beloved husband and father. The grass was frosted over, crunching under my boots. I cleared away a few dead leaves from the headstone. "Hello, John," I whispered. My breath formed a white cloud in the frigid air. "I'm doing something terrible," I confessed to the cold stone. "I'm going to break his heart. I'm going to humiliate him." The wind whistled through the bare branches of the oak trees. It sounded like a sigh. "He's lost, John. He thinks he's a king because he wears a crown made of credit cards. He treats people like dirt because he's terrified they'll see the dirt on him." I touched the cold granite. "I have to break the man he thinks he is, to find the son we raised. You understand, don't you?" I waited, half expecting a sign. A bird, a ray of sun. Nothing happened. The world remained grey and silent. That was the answer. There were no signs. There was only action and consequence. John had left me the money, but he had left the burden of parenting to me. I'll bring him back, I promised. I'll bring him home, even if I have to drag him. December 22nd. Jason was at his office. I knew this because I was sitting in the lobby of the building across the street, drinking tea and watching the entrance. At 2 p.m, he came out. He wasn't walking with his usual confident stride. He was stumbling slightly. He stopped at a trash can and leaned over it, bracing himself with both hands. He looked like he was going to be sick. He loosened his tie. He wiped sweat from his forehead despite the freezing temperature. He pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he did something that made my heart stop. He dialed a number, and a second later the phone in my purse buzzed. I stared at it. The screen lit up. Jason. He was calling me. I hadn't spoken to him in months. I had ignored every text, every voicemail. But now, seeing him physically crumbling on the street corner, the urge to answer was overpowering. Pick it up, Mary. Just hear his voice. My hand hovered over the green button. If I answered, what would I say? Hello? And then what? He would ask for money, or he would ask for comfort, and I would have to lie. I would have to pretend I didn't know about the house and the loan, the impending doom. I couldn't lie to him anymore. I let it ring. Across the street, I saw Jason pull the phone away from his ear. He looked at it with a mixture of rage and despair. He screamed something, a silent scream behind the glass of the window between us, and nearly threw the phone into the traffic. But he didn't. He couldn't afford a new phone. He shoved it into his pocket and walked away, his shoulders slumped. The buzzing in my purse stopped. Missed call. Jason. I felt like a surgeon who had just cut into a patient without anesthesia. It was necessary, but it was brutal. December 23rd, the night before. The city was manic. Last-minute shoppers were running through the streets. Carols were blasting from every storefront. Joy to the world. There was no joy in the Henderson household. I knew their schedule. Lisa was hosting a pre-celebration dinner at a trendy restaurant. She wanted to toast to their new life before the keys were even in their hands. I decided to go to the restaurant, not to eat, but to watch. I sat at the bar, wearing my disguise, the dark wig, the heavy glasses. I nursed a martini I didn't drink. They were at a centre table, a group of 6, Lisa, Jason, and 2 other couples who looked like clones of them. The women wore sequins. The men wore watches that cost as much as a small car. Lisa was radiant. She was holding court. And the foyer, she was saying, her voice carrying over the music. It's massive. We're going to put a 12-foot tree there next year. It's going to be iconic. To the Hendersons, one of the men toasted. To the manor born. To the manor born, they all chorused. Jason raised his glass, but his hand was shaking. The wine rippled in the glass, a tiny dark ocean of anxiety. He didn't drink. He just held the glass, staring through it. Jason, darling, you're not drinking, Lisa chided, tapping his arm. Celebrate. We made it. Yeah, Jason murmured. We made it. He looked like a man on death row eating his last meal. Suddenly he stood up. I need some air, he said. Jason, don't be rude, Lisa hissed, her smile tightening. I need a minute. He walked past the bar. He walked right past me. He smelled of fear. It's a distinct smell, sour, metallic, like old pennies. I spun on my stool and followed him out. He stood on the sidewalk under the awning. Snow had started to fall again, light, dusty flakes. He was hyperventilating. He loosened his collar, gasping for air. I can't do this, he whispered to himself. I can't do this. He reached for his phone again. He dialed. My phone, on silent mode in my pocket, vibrated against my hip. He was calling me again. He was calling his mother from the edge of the cliff. I stood 5 feet behind him, hidden in the shadows of the building. I could have reached out and touched his shoulder. "Pick up," he pleaded to the voicemail. "Mom, please, just pick up. Tell me to stop. Tell me I'm an idiot. Just be there." He waited. "Please," he broke down, his voice cracking. "I don't want the house. I don't want any of it. I just want to come home." My heart shattered into a million pieces. He did know. Deep down, under the layers of greed and Lisa's influence, my boy was still in there. He was screaming for help. I took a step forward. I was going to do it. I was going to end the charade right there. I was going to hug him and tell him I would fix it all. But then the restaurant door opened. "Jason," it was Lisa. She marched out, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. She didn't look concerned. She looked furious. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "The Davises are talking about their summer home in the Hamptons, and you're out here pouting." Jason wiped his eyes quickly, turning away from her. I'm stressed, Lisa. The money, the loan." "Oh, shut up about the money," she spat. "You always do this. You get cold feet. You're such a coward, Jason." Jason flinched. "I'm not a coward." "Then prove it," she said, crossing her arms. "Go back in there. Buy a round of drinks. Act like the man I married. Act like a man who owns Heritage Lane." She stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Because if you back out now, if you humiliate me in front of them, I am done. Do you hear me? I'm gone." Jason looked at her. He looked at the woman he had sold his soul for. And then I saw the light go out in his eyes. The boy who wanted to come home died, and the shell took over. He straightened his spine. He buttoned his jacket. He put on the mask. "I'm coming," he said. His voice was dead. "Good," Lisa smiled, linking her arm through his. "Now, let's go finish the champagne." They walked back inside. I stood alone in the snow. I realized then that saving him tonight would have been a mistake. If I had hugged him, Lisa would have dragged him back in. She would have called me a meddling old woman. Jason would have been torn apart. No. He needed to see her lose. He needed to see the house stripped away. He needed to be left with nothing, so he could see that nothing was exactly what Lisa offered him. I turned and walked into the night. "Tomorrow," I whispered. "Tomorrow, the landlord arrives. December 24th, the day of judgment." I woke up at 6 a.m. I didn't sleep much. I spent the morning preparing. I didn't dress like a widow today. I didn't dress like a CEO. I dressed like a matriarch. I wore a suit of deep midnight blue velvet. It was soft, but it looked like armor. I wore the pearls my husband had given me on our 30th anniversary. I put on my makeup with precision, covering the dark circles, highlighting the eyes that had seen too much. I looked in the mirror. "You are not Mary the victim," I told my reflection. "You are Mary Henderson. You own the street." At 2 p.m, I went to Finch's office. The office was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home for the holiday. Only Finch and his senior paralegal remained. The conference room was prepared, a long mahogany table, a view of the snow-covered city, a stack of documents in the centre. "Are you ready?" Finch asked. He looked pale. He knew this was going to be a bloodbath. "I am." "They are scheduled to arrive at 4 p.m, Finch said. "We have the eviction notice prepared, just in case things get violent." He won't get violent, I said. He'll get quiet. That's what Hendersons do when their world ends. We get quiet. I sat at the head of the table. I spun the chair around so I was facing the window, my back to the door. I wanted them to walk in. I wanted them to see the chair. I wanted the reveal to be slow. 3:30 p.m. The phone on the desk buzzed. They're in the lobby, the receptionist said. Send them up, Finch commanded. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Thump, thump, thump. I heard the elevator ding. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Lisa's voice, sharp and excited. Oh, look at this view. Jason, look. This is the level we play at now. Jason's voice, mumbled, indistinguishable. Finch opened the door. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, Finch said, his voice professional and cold. Please, come in. Mr. Finch, Lisa said. A pleasure. We are so excited. We have the cashier's check right here. I heard the rustle of paper, the sound of money changing hands. Please, have a seat, Finch said. The seller is just reviewing the final addendum. The seller is here, Lisa asked, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. Oh, wonderful. We've been dying to meet them. We promise to keep the integrity of the house. The seller appreciates that, Finch said. I sat perfectly still. My hands were clasped in my lap. I stared at the grey sky outside. Is the seller shy? Lisa asked, sensing the strange atmosphere. Not shy, Finch said. Just particular. Well, Jason spoke up. His voice was tight. Let's get this over with. I want to sign. Before you sign, Finch said, the seller has one condition, a clause regarding the occupancy. What clause? Lisa demanded. We agreed on everything. The seller wishes to explain it personally, Finch said. This was my cue. I took a deep breath. I thought of the snow. I thought of the closed door. I thought of the tin of cookies in the trash. Slowly, deliberately, I swiveled the leather chair around. The mechanism was silent. I turned to face them. Lisa was holding a champagne glass. Where did she get that? She was smiling. Jason was holding a pen, poised over the contract. They both looked up. For a second, there was no recognition. Just a wealthy woman in a blue velvet suit sitting at the head of the table. Then Jason squinted. He dropped the pen. It clattered onto the mahogany table like a gunshot. Mom? The word was barely a breath. Lisa froze. She looked at Jason, then at me. Her eyes narrowed. Mary! She shrieked. It was a sound of pure indignity. What are you doing here? This is a private meeting. How did you get in here? She turned to Finch. Why is his mother here? Did she follow us? This is harassment. Get her out. Finch didn't move. He stood next to me like a loyal guard dog. Mrs. Henderson, Finch said calmly to Lisa, you wanted to meet the seller. Lisa blinked. What? You wanted to meet the owner of M.H. Trust, the owner of 1422 Heritage Lane, the owner of the entire Heritage District. Finch gestured to me with an open hand. May I introduce you to Mary Henderson, your landlord? The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. Lisa's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked from Finch to me, waiting for the punchline. Jason didn't look at Finch. He looked at me. His face went white, not pale, white, like a sheet of paper. He looked at my suit. He looked at my pearls. He looked at the way I sat in the chair, not hunched and apologetic, but straight and regal. The pieces fell into place. The M.H. Trust, the sudden availability of the house, the approval of their shaky finances. You, Jason whispered. It's you? Hello, Jason, I said. My voice was steady, calm, and terrifyingly polite. Merry Christmas. I don't understand, Lisa stammered. You, you're broke. You knit blankets. You drive a Toyota. I drive a Maybach when I choose to, I corrected her gently. And I don't knit blankets anymore. I found that people didn't appreciate them. I stood up. I placed my hands on the table and leaned forward. You wanted a house, Lisa. You wanted a status symbol. You wanted to live on my street. Your street? Lisa screeched. You're lying. Mr. Finch? I nodded to Arthur. Finch slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a deed summary. It listed the assets of M.H. Trust, 1420 Heritage Lane, 1422 Heritage Lane, 1424 Heritage Lane, the Henderson Commercial Block, total asset value $45,000. Lisa looked at the paper. She grabbed it. Her eyes scanned the numbers. Her hands started to shake. She looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't love. It wasn't respect. It was greed. Pure, unadulterated hunger. "Mary!" she gasped, her voice suddenly transforming into a syrupy sweetness. "Oh my God, we didn't know. Why didn't you tell us? We've been so worried about you." I ignored her. I looked only at my son. Jason hadn't moved. He was staring at me with a look of total devastation. He wasn't looking at the money. He was realizing something far worse. He realized that for his entire life he had underestimated the one person who loved him. He realized that while he was playing at being rich, I was actually rich, and he realized that he had treated a queen like a beggar. "Why?" Jason croaked. "Why did you do this?" "Do what?" I asked. "Buy property? Invest? Or do you mean, why did I let you walk into this room?" "You set us up," Jason said, tears filling his eyes. "You let us borrow. You let us sell everything." "I didn't make you do anything, Jason," I said sharply. "I didn't make you buy a house you couldn't afford. I didn't make you ignore your mother for a year. I didn't make you shut the door in my face." The memory of the door hit him. He flinched physically. "I stood in the snow," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent room. "I stood in the snow and I offered you my heart. You threw it in the trash because it wasn't wrapped in gold." I reached into my bag. I pulled out the contract they were about to sign. "So today," I said, "I wrapped it in gold." I held up the contract. "You want the house. It's yours." Lisa's eyes lit up. "Really?" "But," I said, "I'm not selling it to you." "What?" Jason asked. "I'm not selling it," I repeated. "I'm keeping it, and I'm keeping the deposit." "You can't do that," Lisa screamed. "That's theft." "Read the contract, Lisa," Finch said coldly. Clause 14b. The seller reserves the right to withdraw from the sale at any time prior to counter-signature with forfeiture of deposit in cases of misrepresentation of financial status. "We didn't misrepresent. You lied on your income statement," Finch said. "We have the real numbers. You're insolvent." Lisa collapsed into a chair. She looked defeated. But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at Jason. "I'm not selling the house," I said to him, "but I am willing to rent it." Jason looked up. "Rent?" "Yes, you can live there. You can have your address. You can have your status. Lisa can have her foyer." "What's the catch?" Jason asked. He knew there was a catch. "The rent," I said, "is not money." I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him. I smelled the fear on him, but also the shame. "The rent," I said, "is that you come to dinner every Sunday at my house, the old house." I looked at Lisa. "Alone." Lisa gasped. "You're trying to separate us." "I'm trying to get to know my son," I said, without his translator. I looked back at Jason. "That's the deal. You live in the mansion. You pay the utilities. But every Sunday you come home and you help me in the garden and you eat my cooking and you talk to me. Real talk. Not this fake cocktail party nonsense." And if I refuse, is that it? Fayuz? Jason asked. Then the deal is off, I said. You lose the deposit, you lose the house, and considering your debts, you probably lose your job. It was an ultimatum. It was blackmail. It was love wrapped in barbed wire. Jason looked at Lisa. She was fuming, red-faced, plotting her next move. He looked at the contract. He looked at me. He saw the mother who had walked through a blizzard. He saw the landlord who held his life in her hands. Slowly, Jason picked up the pen. The pen scratched against the paper. It was a harsh, dry sound in the quiet room. Scritch. Scratch. Jason didn't write his signature with the flourish he usually used for bank documents. He wrote it slowly, dragging the ink across the page as if the pen weighed 50 pounds. Jason Henderson. He put the pen down. He didn't look at me. He looked at his hands. Done, he whispered. Lisa let out a breath she had been holding for 5 minutes. She reached for the contract, her eyes scanning it greedily to make sure he hadn't made a mistake. So, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and suppressed rage. We get the keys. Today? Miss Finch will hand them over, I said, leaning back in my leather chair. Along with the lease agreement. It is a month-to-month tenancy, Jason. Revocable if the rent is not paid. I know, Jason said. His voice was dull. Sundays. Sundays, I confirmed. Starting this week, noon to 5. This is ridiculous, Lisa muttered, standing up and smoothing her skirt. She glared at me with pure venom. You're treating him like a child. You're trying to humiliate us. I am treating him like a tenant, I said calmly, and I am treating you, Lisa, like a guest, because the lease, I pointed to the document, is in Jason's name only. Lisa froze. What? If Jason leaves, you leave. If Jason fails to meet the terms, you leave. You have no claim to the property. You are an occupant. It was the final nail. I had stripped her of her power. She couldn't take the house in a divorce. She couldn't kick him out. Her status was entirely dependent on him keeping me happy. For the first time in their marriage, Jason held the cards. He just didn't know how to play them yet. Let's go, Jason said, standing up. He looked exhausted. He didn't look like a man who had just secured a multi-million-dollar home. He looked like a man leaving a funeral. He walked to the door. He didn't say goodbye. Lisa lingered for a second. She looked at me, then at the deeds summary on the table. You sat on all that money, she hissed, while we were struggling? You weren't struggling, Lisa, I said softly. You were climbing. There is a difference. She scoffed, spun on her heel, and marched out. The door closed. I sat alone in the conference room. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the last hour suddenly drained away. I slumped in the chair. My hands started to shake uncontrollably. Are you all right? Finch asked, stepping forward to pour me a glass of water. I feel terrible, I admitted. I feel like a villain. You just saved him from bankruptcy, Finch noted, and you saved him from a 30-year mortgage he couldn't pay. I know, I sighed, taking the water, but looking at his face, Arthur, he looked broken. Bones have to break before they can be set straight, Finch said. Go home, Mary. Rest. Sunday is coming. The first Sunday. I woke up at dawn. I couldn't sleep. I cleaned the house. I polished the silver. I went to the market and bought the ingredients for beef stew. It was Jason's favourite meal when he was a teenager. Hearty, simple, unpretentious. I spent hours chopping carrots and potatoes. The rhythm of the knife hitting the cutting board was soothing. Chop, chop, chop. I wondered what was happening in the mansion on Heritage Lane. I imagined Lisa pacing the marble floors, coaching Jason on what to say. Don't let her control you. Don't tell her about our credit card debt. Just eat the food and get out. I wondered if Jason was dreading it. Of course he was. He was coming to face the person he had betrayed. Noon came. I stood by the window, pulling back the lace curtain just an inch. At 11:58 a.m., a car pulled into my driveway. It wasn't the Mercedes or the BMW. It was an Uber. Interesting. Jason got out. He was wearing jeans and a sweater. He looked casual, but his posture was stiff. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the house. It was the same house he had grown up in, the peeling paint on the porch railing, the overgrown rose bushes I hadn't trimmed yet, the modest sedan in the driveway. He walked up the path. He didn't knock. He still had his key. I hadn't changed the locks. The door opened. "Mom, in the kitchen," I called out. He walked in. He stopped in the doorway. The smell of the stew filled the air. It was the smell of his childhood. I saw his shoulders drop an inch. "You're on time," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "It's part of the contract, isn't it?" he said. His tone was guarded, slightly sarcastic. "Sit down," I said. "Coffee?" "Sure." I poured him a mug. He sat at the small, round kitchen table, the same table where he used to do his homework, the same table where we ate breakfast after his father died. He looked around the kitchen. He looked at the old linoleum floor. He looked at the calendar on the wall with the pictures of kittens. "So," he said, taking a sip of coffee, "you own the street?" "I do." "And the commercial block downtown?" "Yes." "How long?" he asked. "How long have you been loaded?" "Since before you were born," I said. "Your father was very good at buying land when nobody else wanted it. We just didn't sell." "Why didn't you tell me?" The anger was rising in his voice now. Why did I have to take student loans? Why did I have to drive that beat-up Honda in college? Why did we live like this? He gestured around the modest kitchen as if it were a prison cell. "Because we wanted you to build your own muscles," I said, sitting opposite him. "If we had given you everything, Jason, you would have never learned how to work. You would have been soft." "Well, joke's on you," he laughed bitterly. "I turned out soft anyway. I'm living in your house because I can't afford my own." "You're not soft," I said. "You're just lost. There's a difference." He fell silent. He traced the rim of the coffee mug. "Lisa is furious," he said, after a while. "I imagine she is. She says you're manipulative." "I am," I agreed. "I learned it from watching her." He looked up, surprised by my bluntness. A small, reluctant smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "She really wanted that house," he said, "and now she has it. Is she happy?" Jason looked down. "She's busy, buying furniture, posting photos." "But is she happy?" I pressed. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. "Finish your coffee," I said, standing up. "We have work to do." "Work?" He looked confused. I thought the rent was dinner." "The rent is time," I said, "and the garden is a mess. I need you to clean out the gutters and trim the hedges. My arthritis is bad this year. Mum, I'm wearing a cashmere sweater. There are some old work shirts of your father's in the garage." I said. "They should fit you." He stared at me. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say, "I am a vice president of finance. I don't clean gutters." But then he remembered the contract. He remembered the eviction notice that Finch was keeping in his top drawer. He stood up. "Fine." For the next 3 hours, my son worked. I sat on the porch with a blanket, supervising. He changed into his father's old flannel shirt. It was a little tight across the shoulders, but it smelled of sawdust and Old Spice. He climbed the ladder. He pulled handfuls of wet, rotting leaves out of the gutters. He grunted with effort. He got dirt on his face. He scraped his knuckles. It was good for him. There is something about physical labour that cleanses the soul. You can't lie to a gutter. You can't charm a hedge. You just have to do the work. I saw him sweating. I saw the frustration in his movements, the angry way he snipped at the branches. He was taking out his anger on the vegetation. Good. Let it out. Around 4 o'clock p.m., he finished. He came back to the porch, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. He was dirty, dishevelled, and breathing hard. He looked more like a man than he had in that tuxedo on Christmas Eve. Done, he panted. Happy? The hedges look good, I said. Go wash up. Dinner is ready. We ate the beef stew in silence for the first few minutes. He ate hungrily. Physical work makes you hungry in a way that stress doesn't. It's good, he mumbled. I haven't had this in years. Lisa doesn't cook. Lisa orders in. Or we eat out. Cooking makes the kitchen smell. I smiled. God forbid a kitchen smells like food. He chuckled. It was a real sound this time. Mom! He put down his spoon. He looked at me across the table. The anger was gone, replaced by confusion. Why didn't you sell the house to me? Why the rent scheme? Because if I sold it to you, I said, you would think you owned it, and you would think you owned the success that came with it. And this way, you know the truth, I said. You are living in a borrowed life, Jason. The house is mine. The money is mine. The only thing that is yours is what you do with your hands, like the gutters. He looked at his hands. They were red and raw. You're trying to teach me a lesson. I'm trying to give you a reality check, I said. You were drowning, Jason. You were borrowing money at 18% interest. I saw the papers. He went pale. You saw that. I own the bank building, Jason. I see everything. He put his head in his hands. I'm so screwed, Mom. Even with the house covered, I have so much debt. The credit cards, the car lease, Lisa's spending. I know. I don't know how to get out. You stop digging, I said, and you start being honest. Does Lisa know about the 18% loan? He shook his head. No, she'd kill me. She's killing you anyway, I said sharply, just slowly. He didn't defend her. That was the first crack in the dam. I have to go, he said abruptly, standing up. It's 5 o'clock. Okay, I said. I'll see you next Sunday. Yeah. He walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the knob. Mom? Yes. Thanks for the stew. He walked out. I watched him get into his Uber. It was a start. The weeks turned into months. January, February, March. The ritual became set in stone. Every Sunday, Jason arrived at noon. Every Sunday, he worked. He fixed the leaking faucet in the bathroom. He repainted the guest room. He chopped firewood. He started to change. The bloat in his face from the alcohol and rich food began to fade. He looked leaner, harder. The conversations at the dinner table became longer. He told me about his job, the actual job, not the glamorous version. He told me he hated it. He told me he felt like a fraud, pushing financial products on people who couldn't afford them. I wanted to be an architect, he said one Sunday, staring into the fire. Remember? I remember, I said. You used to draw skyscrapers on napkins. Lisa said there was no money in architecture unless you're a star. Lisa says a lot of things, I murmured. We didn't talk much about Lisa, but her presence was there, like a ghost haunting the edges of our peace. I knew things were getting bad at the mansion. I had spies. The neighbours, my tenants, talked. They told me about the arguments. Loud shouting matches that echoed from 1422 Heritage Lane late at night. They told me about Lisa leaving in her convertible, tyres screeching, and not coming back for days. The pressure was mounting. Chenlo, without the validation of ownership, without the ability to brag that they owned the street, the house was just a shell, and Jason was no longer playing the part of the indulgent husband. He was tired, and he was broke. One Sunday in April, Jason didn't show up at noon, 12:15 p.m., 12:30 p.m. I started to worry. He had never been late. The fear of eviction kept him punctual. At 1 o'clock p.m., my phone rang. "Mom?" His voice was a whisper. He sounded like he was in pain. "Jason, where are you?" I'm I'm at the house. Can you come, please?" "What's wrong?" "It's Lisa. She found the papers, the loan papers, and she found out about the rent account. I'm coming." I didn't call the driver. I grabbed my keys and drove my 15-year-old Toyota. I drove fast. I pulled up to the mansion on Heritage Lane. The front door was wide open. I walked in. The foyer was indeed magnificent, just as Lisa had wanted, but now it was a war zone. A vase was shattered on the marble floor. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Expensive suits, silk dresses, thrown from the balcony above like confetti. "Jason?" I called out. I found him in the living room. He was sitting on the floor, leaning against the sofa. He held a glass of whiskey in his hand. There was a cut on his cheek. Lisa was standing by the fireplace. She was manic. Her hair was wild. Her makeup smeared. She was holding a stack of papers, bank statements. "Here she is," Lisa screamed when she saw me. "The puppeteer, the landlord." "What is going on?" I asked, stepping over a pile of neckties. "I found his stash." Lisa laughed hysterically, waving the papers. "I found out where his money is going. He's not paying the mortgage. He's paying you. He's paying off his secret loans." She turned on Jason, kicking his leg. "You liar. You told me we were rich. You told me you handled it." "I tried," Jason mumbled. "I tried, Lisa." "You're a failure," she screamed. "You're a broke, pathetic loser living in his mommy's house. I can't believe I wasted 5 years on you." She looked at me. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and full of hate. "And you," she spat, "you sitting on millions while we scrape by. You're a monster. You wanted this. You wanted to ruin all our marriage." "I didn't ruin your marriage, Lisa," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights. If the foundation is rotten, that's not the fault of the light switch." "I'm leaving," Lisa declared. "I'm done. I'm contacting a lawyer. I want half of everything." "Half of what?" Jason asked, looking up. He laughed. It was a dark, broken sound. "Half of the debt, because that's all I have, Liz. I have 0 assets. I have negative net worth." "I want half of her money." Lisa pointed at me. "I was his wife. I'm entitled to the family estate." I stepped forward. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my hand. I just looked at her with the full weight of the landlord. "Lisa," I said, "you seem to forget who signed the prenuptial agreement." She froze. "And you seem to forget," I continued, "that the trust is in my name. Jason doesn't own a brick of this street. If you divorce him, you get exactly what he has. Debt." Lisa's face crumpled. She realized the game was over. There was no golden parachute. There was no payout. She looked at the house one last time, the house she couldn't keep. "I hate you," she whispered to Jason. "I hate you both." She grabbed her purse. She didn't pack a bag. She just walked out the front door. We heard her car start. We heard it speed away. Then silence. The mansion was quiet. Jason sat on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of his life. The cut on his cheek was bleeding sluggishly. I walked over and sat down on the floor next to him. I didn't care about my velvet suit. We sat there for a long time, watching the dust motes dance in the light from the bay window. "She's gone," Jason whispered. "Yes, I have nothing, Mom." I reached out and took his hand. It was rough from the gardening. It was a strong hand. "You have a job," I said. "You have your health. You have a mother who loves you." I squeezed his hand. "And," I added, "you have a lease. Rent is due on Sunday." Jason looked at me. He blinked. Then he started to laugh. He laughed until he cried. He laughed until he was gasping for air, shaking with the release of 5 years of tension. "You're tough," he choked out. "I'm the landlord," I said. "We have standards." I stood up and offered him a hand. "Come on," I said. "Let's clean this up. And then Let's go home. I think we need cookies. He looked at my hand. He took it. He pulled himself up. He was standing on his own 2 feet. The worst was over. The house of cards had fallen. Now we could build something real. The divorce was not a battle. It was an evacuation. Lisa didn't fight for custody of the dog. They didn't have one. She didn't fight for the furniture. Most of it was leased. She fought for her pride, but Mr. Finch, sitting across the table with his calm, predatory smile, stripped her of even that. I wasn't in the room when the papers were signed. I didn't need to be. I was the landlord. I didn't concern myself with the squabbles of tenants who were breaking their lease, but Jason told me about it later. She didn't look at me, he said. We were sitting on my back porch. It was May. The air smelled of lilacs and wet earth. She just signed the papers, took her purse, and walked out. She said I was a waste of time. Time is never wasted, I said, pouring him more iced tea. It's just spent. Sometimes we spend it on the wrong things. Jason looked different now. The puffiness around his eyes was gone. The redness in his face, a symptom of high blood pressure and too much scotch, had faded into a healthy, albeit tired, tan. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. He looked 10 years younger and 10 years sadder. I gave the keys back to Finch. This morning, he said quietly. The keys to the mansion? Yeah, 1422 Heritage Lane. It's empty again. I nodded. I watched a robin hopping across the lawn, hunting for a worm. You didn't have to leave, I said. The lease was valid. I couldn't stay there, Mom. It's too big, too quiet. Every room screams her name. Besides, he looked down at his hands. I can't afford the utilities. Even with the time rent, the heating bill alone is more than my paycheck. Where will you go? I found a place, he said. A small smile touched his lips. A studio, above a bakery in the East End. It smells like yeast and cinnamon all day. It's small, the floor is slanted, but it's mine. I can pay for it with my own money. My heart swelled. This was the victory. Not the crushing of Lisa, not the reveal of my wealth, but this. My son choosing a slanted floor and the smell of yeast over a marble prison because it was honest. I'm proud of you, I said. He looked at me, surprised. Proud? Mum, I'm 33 years old. I'm divorced. I'm broke. I'm living in a studio apartment. I'm a failure. You were a failure when you were living in a mansion you couldn't afford, I corrected him. Now you're just starting over. That's not failure, Jason. That's grit. The following weeks were a study in humility. Jason began the great purge. He sold everything. The designer suits went to consignment shops. The golf clubs he never used went on eBay. The wine collection was liquidated. He kept only what was essential. One Saturday, he came to my house with a small box. He looked nervous. I went to the pawn shop, he said. My stomach tightened. Oh? I wanted to get something back. He opened the box. Inside, resting on a bed of cheap cotton, was the watch. The Rolex I had given him for his graduation. Time is yours to make. He picked it up. His fingers trembled slightly. It cost me 3 times what I pawned it for to get it back, he admitted. I had to sell the last of my crypto, but I couldn't let it go. He held it out to me. I want you to keep it, he said. It's your watch, Jason. I don't deserve it yet, he said firmly. I pawned your love to buy a closing fee. I'm not ready to wear this again. Keep it for me, please. When I've made things right, maybe you can give it back to me. I took the watch. It felt heavy and cold. I looked at the engraving on the back. Okay, I whispered. I'll keep it safe. I put the watch in the pocket of my apron. It ticked against my hip, a heartbeat of promise. June arrived, hot and humid. The time rent continued, even though he wasn't living in the mansion. He insisted on it. I still owe you, he said, for the lawyer fees, for the mess, for everything. So every Sunday he came, but it wasn't just gardening anymore. We started tackling the house itself. The old Victorian that I had lived in for 40 years needed love. We stripped the wallpaper in the hallway. We sanded the floors. We painted the kitchen a soft, buttery yellow. It was during these hours of labour, covered in dust and paint, that we really talked. We talked about his father. Jason asked questions he had never asked before. How did Dad start the business? Was he scared? Did he ever fail? He failed twice, I told him, as we were scraping old varnish off the banister. He went bankrupt in the 90s. We almost lost this house. I never knew that, Jason said, stopping his work. I always thought he was invincible. Nobody is invincible, I said. He didn't tell you because he wanted you to feel safe, just like you didn't tell me about your debt because you wanted me to be proud. Jason looked at me. His eyes were wide. The realization hit him. We do the same things, don't we? He whispered. We hide our pain to protect the people we love. Yes, I said. But the problem with hiding pain is that it festers. It turns into shame, and shame makes us do stupid things, like locking our mothers out in a blizzard. He flinched. He still couldn't forgive himself for that night. I'm sorry, he said again. He said it every week. I know, I said. Now sand that corner. You missed a spot. The real turning point came in mid-July. It was a Tuesday. I was at my office, reviewing the blueprints for a new community centre I was planning to build in the South District. It was a passion project, affordable, sustainable, beautiful. My secretary buzzed in. Miss Henderson, your son is here. I frowned. It was a work day. Send him in. Jason walked in. He looked pale. He was wearing his work clothes, slacks and a button-down shirt, but his tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck. He was carrying a cardboard box. My heart skipped a beat. A cardboard fag, the universal symbol of the terminated employee. Jason? I stood up. What happened? He put the box on my desk. Inside was a stapler, a framed photo of us, a new one, taken last Sunday, and a stress ball. I quit, he said. You quit? I repeated. Jason, you have debts. You have rent. I couldn't do it any more, Mum, he said. His voice was shaking, but his eyes were clear. I was sitting in a meeting. We were discussing how to package subprime auto loans to sell to pension funds. It was predatory. It was exactly what got me into trouble. Selling dreams to people who can't afford them. He ran a hand through his hair. I looked at the numbers and I just saw misery. I saw people like me drowning, and I was the one pushing their heads underwater. He took a deep breath, so I stood up. I told my boss I couldn't be a part of it, and I walked out. He looked at me, terrified. He was waiting for the lecture. He was waiting for the landlord to remind him of his financial obligations. I don't know how I'm going to pay you this month, he confessed. I don't have a plan. I just knew if I stayed there one more day, I would lose my soul. And I just got it back. I looked at my son. He was unemployed. He was broke. He was standing in a skyscraper office that belonged to his mother, holding a box of junk. And he had never looked more like his father. A slow smile spread across my face. Good, I said. Jason blinked. Good? I hated that job, I said honestly. It made you arrogant. It made you hollow. But the money is renewable, I said. Integrity is not. I walked around the desk and hugged him. He stiffened for a second, then collapsed into the embrace. He smelled of office air conditioning and fear. We'll figure it out, I whispered. You did the right thing. He pulled away, wiping his eyes. I have to find something else. Maybe, I don't know, bartending, construction. I'm good with my hands now. I looked at the blueprints on my desk. The large sheets of paper were rolled out, held down by coffee mugs. Jason's eyes followed my gaze. He saw the white lines on the blue paper. He saw the elevation of the community centre. He reached out and touched the paper. It was an instinctual movement. Who drew this? He asked. A firm downtown, expensive, flashy. Jason frowned. He traced a line with his finger. The load-bearing wall here is wrong, he muttered. If you put the atrium there, the morning light will hit the glass and create a greenhouse effect. It'll cost a fortune to cool in the summer. I watched him. The transformation was instant. His posture changed. He wasn't the defeated finance guy anymore. He was the boy who used to draw skyscrapers on napkins. And this circulation path, he tapped the paper. It's cluttered. If this is a community centre, you want flow. You want the kids to be able to run from the gym to the library without bottling up in the lobby. He looked up at me. His eyes were bright. Mum, these plans are mediocre. You're paying too much. I know, I said softly. That's why I haven't signed off on them yet. I leaned against the desk. You said you wanted to do construction. Yeah, just to pay the bills. I have a better idea, I said. I opened my drawer and pulled out a fresh blank notepad and a set of drafting pens. I slid them across the polished mahogany surface toward him. I need an architect, I said, or at least a project manager who understands the vision. Jason looked at the pens. He looked at me. Mom, I'm not licensed. I haven't drawn in 10 years. My degree is in finance. You did 2 years of architecture before you switched majors for the money, I reminded him. You have the eye. You always did. I can't design a building, he said, backing away. It's too big. Then don't design the building, I said. Just fix the lobby. Fix the light problem. Start there. I picked up the stress ball from his box and tossed it into the trash can. You're not working for me, I added sternly. I'm not giving you a handout. This is a consulting gig. I'll pay you an hourly rate. A fair one, not a finance rate, a junior draftsman rate. You'd trust me, he asked, after everything? I trust the man who cleaned my gutters for 6 months without complaining, I said. I trust the man who sold his watch to pay his debts. I trust the man who quit his job because it felt wrong. I pointed to the chair behind the desk. Not my chair, but the guest chair. Sit down, Jason. Let's look at the atrium. He hesitated. He looked at the pens. It was the terrifying precipice of a dream he had buried a decade ago. Slowly, he reached out. He picked up a pen. He uncapped it. He bent over the blueprints. Okay, he whispered. If we move this wall and angle the glass here. I watched him work. I saw the tension leave his neck. I saw the focus lock in. He was home, not the house on Heritage Lane, and not the house I lived in. He was home in his own skin. August was a revelation. Jason threw himself into the work. He worked from his tiny studio apartment late into the night. When I visited him, the walls were covered in sketches. The smell of yeast from the bakery downstairs mixed with the smell of graphite and eraser dust. He was exhausted, but he was alive. He brought me his revised plans for the community centre. They were brilliant, simple, elegant, human. He had removed the vanity of the original architect and replaced it with utility and warmth. This is it, I said, looking at the final rendering. This is what I wanted. It still needs a structural engineer to sign off, he said, rubbing his neck, and a licensed architect to stamp it. I've hired a firm to handle the compliance, I said, but the design is yours. We're going to build this, Jason. He smiled, a real wide smile that reached his eyes. Thanks, Mum, for the chance. You earned it. We were sitting in a diner near his apartment. It was a cheap place, greasy spoons and bottomless coffee. It was our new tradition on Tuesday nights. So, he said, dipping a fry in ketchup. I did the math. With the consulting fee you're paying me, I can pay my rent, buy groceries, and put about $500 a month toward my remaining debt. That's a good start. It'll take me 7 years, he said, wincing slightly, to be debt-free, to be back to zero. 7 years. It sounded like a biblical sentence. 7 years is a long time, I agreed. It's my punishment, he said, shrugging. I bought the ticket. I take the ride. I stirred my coffee. I looked at my son. He was accepting his fate. He was willing to walk the long road. He wasn't looking for a shortcut anymore. It was time for the next lesson. Or, rather, the next reveal. Jason, I said, do you remember the rent you paid on the mansion? The gardening, the repairs? Yeah, the time rent. And do you remember the work you did on my house, painting the kitchen, refinishing the floors? Sure, hard to forget. My back still hurts. I kept a log, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small black notebook. I opened it to a page marked with a red ribbon. I tracked every hour you worked, I said, and I assigned it a value, a market value, not minimum wage. I charged you out at a contractor's rate because the work was professional quality. Jason looked confused. Okay, so, and, I continued, I also tracked the value you added to the properties. The repairs on the mansion preserved its value. The work on my house increased its appraisal. I slid the notebook across the table. You weren't just paying rent, Jason. You were investing. He looked at the numbers. Total hours worked, 320. Base value, 16,000. Value, add bonus, $25,000. I don't understand, he said. I didn't keep the rent, I explained. I put it in an escrow account. It's your money, Jason. It's your sweat equity. He stared at me. You saved it for me. I couldn't just give you money, I said. You wouldn't have respected it, but you earned this. Every penny. You bled for it. He looked at the total. $41,000. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't millions. But to a man staring at 7 years of debt, it was a lifeline. It was oxygen. This covers... He did the mental math quickly. This covers the credit cards and the car deficiency. It clears the bad debt, I said. You still have your student loans, but the toxic debt, the stuff that keeps you up at night, is gone. He looked up from the notebook. His eyes were swimming with tears. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand. He squeezed it so hard it hurt, but I didn't pull away. Why? He whispered. Why are you so good to me? I was awful to you. Because you're my son, I said simply, and because I saw you trying. I saw you climbing out of the hole. Ken lowered a ladder for the last 10 feet. He wiped his face with a paper napkin, laughing and crying at the same time. I thought I was digging a ditch, he said. I didn't know I was digging a foundation. That's what work is, Jason, I said. If you do it right, it's always a foundation. He took a deep breath. He looked at the notebook again. Okay, he said. Okay, so I'm out of the hole. You're at ground level, I corrected. Now, we build. Build what? The community centre, I said, but also something else. I leaned in closer. The Henderson Trust owns a lot of property, Jason, but property is just bricks and dirt. It needs vision. I'm getting old. I can't climb ladders. I can't inspect roofs. I can't fight with city councils about zoning. I looked him in the eye. I don't need a tenant anymore. I need a partner. Jason froze. The fry dropped from his hand. A partner? Not a silent partner, I warned. A working partner. You manage the renovations. You design the new projects. You deal with the headaches. I handle the money and the strategy. Mum, that's your empire. It's our legacy, I said. If you want it. He looked out the window at the busy street. He looked at the people walking by, tired people, working people. I don't want to be a landlord, he said softly, not like the ones I used to know. Good, I said, because I don't want to be a landlord either. I want to be a builder. He looked back at me. The fear was gone. The shame was gone. In their place was a steady, quiet confidence. Partner, he said, testing the word. He held out his hand. Partner, I said, shaking it. It was a business deal, but it was also a peace treaty. The waitress came by to refill our coffee. You two look happy, she said, smiling, celebrating something. Jason looked at me. He looked at the notebook. He looked at his hands, calloused and clean. Yeah, he said, we're celebrating a grand opening. Oh? New business? No, Jason smiled. New life. Autumn in the city is usually a season of dying things. Leaves turn brown, the light fades early, and the wind carries the scent of coming winter. But this year, for us, it was a season of birth. The Henderson Community Centre was rising from the ground. It wasn't just a building, it was a hive of activity, and at the centre of it all was Jason. I visited the site on a crisp October morning. I parked my car, the reliable Toyota, and watched from the perimeter fence. Jason was standing in the middle of a muddy pit, holding a roll of blueprints. He was arguing with the foreman, not shouting, but debating. He pointed to the drainage pipe, then to the foundation. He shook his head. He was firm. He looked tired. There were bags under his eyes, and his boots were caked in clay. But he stood tall. He commanded the space, not because he had money, but because he knew the answers. I walked up to him, as the foreman walked away, looking begrudgingly convinced. Problem? I asked. They wanted to use a cheaper grade of PVC for the runoff, Jason said, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. It would have cracked in 5 years. I told them to use the iron. That costs more, I noted, testing him. It costs less than digging it up in 5 years to fix it, he replied instantly. Long-term value, right, partner? I smiled. Right. He wasn't thinking in quarters anymore. He was thinking in decades. November arrived, bringing the anniversary of the slide toward the bottom. We were in Finch's office for the monthly review. The portfolio was performing well. Jason had identified 3 underperforming properties and proposed a renovation plan that was modest but effective. Finch looked at the spreadsheets, then at Jason. I must admit, Finch said, adjusting his glasses, I was sceptical, but these numbers are solid. You have a knack for squeezing value out of a stone, Jason. I learned what it's like to be the stone, Jason said dryly. Finch chuckled. Indeed. There is one more thing, Jason said. He pulled a folder from his bag. It wasn't a Henderson Trust folder. It was plain manila. What is this? I asked. It's about Mrs. Higgins, Jason said. Tenant at the Elm Street Apartments. Unit 4B. I knew the name. Mrs. Higgins was a widow, 70 years old. She had lived there for 20 years. She's 2 months behind on rent, Jason said. I stiffened. The old rules said eviction. The business was a business. And? I asked. Did you serve the notice? No, Jason said. He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a receipt, paid in full. I paid it, Jason said. I looked at him. You paid it? With your own money? From my consulting fees, he nodded. She broke at her hip. She's waiting for her insurance check. It'll come in January. She just needs a bridge. Jason, Finch warned, you can't save everyone. Kenny, you're running a business, not a charity. It's not charity, Jason corrected him. It's retention. Mrs. Higgins takes care of the building. She plants flowers in the summer. She sweeps the hallway. If we evict her, we get a stranger who might trash the place. She's an asset. He looked at me. He was nervous. He thought I would scold him for being soft. I didn't use company funds, he emphasised. It came out of my pocket. I know the rules. I looked at the receipt. I looked at my son. A year ago, he had tried to evict his own mother from his life because she didn't fit his aesthetic. Now he was paying a stranger's rent because he recognised her human value. You're right, I said softly. Jason blinked. I am? She is an asset, I said, but Jason, don't make a habit of paying for it yourself. Next time, bring it to the board. We have a hardship fund for a reason. We do? We do now, I said. Create it. Jason smiled. It was a small, proud smile. December came. The city transformed again. The lights went up. The carols began to play. The air grew sharp and cold. It was the season of memories, and for us, the memories were sharp. We were sitting in my living room. The fire was crackling. I was knitting. Yes, I had started knitting again. It soothed my hands. Jason was looking at the Christmas tree. It was a real tree this year, smelling of pine and sap. It's been a year, he said quietly. Yes, I was a monster, he whispered. I still can't believe I did that. I shut the door. You were scared, I said. Fear makes monsters of us all. He turned to me. The quilt, he said. The one you brought that night. You said you made a quilt. I didn't stop knitting. I did. What happened to it? I brought it home. Did you throw it away? No, I put it in the chest. Can I see it? I stopped knitting. I looked at him. His eyes were full of a yearning that broke my heart. He didn't want the quilt because it was warm. He wanted it because it was the forgiveness he hadn't fully accepted yet. Go look, I said. Guest room, cedar chest. He stood up. He walked slowly to the guest room. I heard the heavy lid of the chest creak open. Silence. Then I heard a soft intake of breath. He came back into the living room a few minutes later. He was holding the quilt. He held it like it was made of spun glass. He ran his hand over the patches, the blue velvet, the denim, the flannel. I remember this, he whispered, touching a square of plaid. This was Dad's shirt, the one he wore when he taught me to ride a bike. Yes. And this. He touched the white satin, my prom sash. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. You saved everything, he said. Every scrap of my life. You saved it all. That's what mothers do, I said. We are the keepers of the scraps. He walked over to me. He knelt down by my chair. He buried his face in the quilt, inhaling the scent of cedar and lavender. I'm sorry, he sobbed into the fabric. I'm so sorry. I reached out and stroked his hair. It was starting to grey at the temples, just a little. He was a man now. I know, I whispered. It's okay. You're home. December 20th. The community centre was finished. It wasn't open yet. The grand opening was scheduled for January, but the structure was done. We walked through the empty lobby. The light poured in through the glass atrium, exactly as Jason had designed it. It was warm, bright, and welcoming. It works, he said, looking up at the beams. The light. It works. It's beautiful, I said. We need a name for it, Jason said. The board suggested the Henderson Centre. No, I said. Why not? Because buildings shouldn't be named after the people who paid for them, I said. They should be named for what they do. So what do we call it? The Open Door, I said. Jason looked at me. He understood immediately. The Open Door Community Centre, he repeated. I like it. It's a promise, it is, I said, that no one gets left out in the cold. December 24th, Christmas Eve. The cycle was complete. A year ago, I had walked through a blizzard to be rejected. Today, the sky was clear. The snow was falling gently, dusting the world in powdered sugar. I told Jason to meet me at Finch's office at 4 p.m. He arrived early. He was wearing a nice sweater and a coat he had bought from a thrift store, a vintage wool coat that looked better than any designer jacket he used to own. "Are we signing more papers?" he asked when I walked in. "No," I said. "No more papers. Today is for closing loops." Finch was there, smiling. He handed me a set of keys. "Ready?" Finch asked. "Ready," I said. I turned to Jason. "I have a gift for you," I said. "Mum, you've given me enough. You gave me my life back." "This isn't money," I said. "It's a responsibility." I handed him the keys. He looked at them. Damn, they were heavy, old-fashioned brass keys. "What are these? Do you recognize them?" He turned them over in his hand. Then he froze. These are the keys to 1422 Heritage Lane." "Yes." He recoiled, almost dropping them. "No," he said, stepping back. "No, Mum, I can't. I don't want that house. I told you. It's a symbol of everything I did wrong. I can't live there." "I know you can't," I said, "and I don't want you to." "Then why?" "Because you're not going to live there," I said. "You're going to be the landlord." "What?" "I bought the house back from the trust," I explained, "personally, and I'm gifting the deed to you, but with a condition. There's always a condition." He smiled weakly. "The condition is that you cannot sell it, and you cannot rent it for profit. Then what am I supposed to do with a 6-bedroom mansion?" "Think, Jason," I said. "What did we just talk about? Mrs. Higgins, the open door?" He looked at the keys. He looked at me. His mind was racing. "You want me to give it away?" "Not give it away," I said. "Share it." "It's a big house," he murmured. "Too big for a family. But—" His eyes lit up. The architect in him was waking up. The project manager was calculating. "It has 6 bedrooms," he said. 4 baths, a massive kitchen, a library." "Yes. It could be a transitional house," he said, the idea taking form, "for families who lost their homes, for single mothers getting back on their feet, like Mrs. Higgins if she had nowhere to go." "Exactly." "We could rezone it," he said, talking faster now. "We'd have to fight the HOA, of course. The neighbours on Heritage Lane would hate it." "Let them hate it," I said, my voice hard. "Let them see that Heritage Lane isn't just for the people who hoard luck. It's for the people who need it." Jason looked at the keys again. This time, he didn't look afraid. He looked empowered. "A shelter on the richest street in the city," he whispered. "It's subversive. It's perfect." "It's poetic justice, Architects," I said. "That house was built on vanity. Now, it will be sustained by charity." He closed his hand around the keys. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll run it. I'll make it the best facility in the state." "I know you will," I said. "You have the blueprints in your head already, don't you?" "I'm already knocking down walls," he grinned. "Good. Now let's go. We have one more stop." "One more?" "Yes," I said. "Dinner." We drove to my house. The old house. It was dark when we arrived. The snow was falling harder now, just like that night a year ago. We walked up the path. "I'll shovel this for you tomorrow," Jason said, kicking the snow. "Thank you." We reached the porch, the same porch where I had stood and waited for the Maybach. I unlocked the door. We stepped into the warmth. The smell of cinnamon and roast chicken hit us. "Go wash up," I said. "I'll set the table." I went to the kitchen. I pulled the roast out of the oven. I arranged the cookies on a plate, the same butter cookies, in the same dented tin. I heard Jason come back downstairs. He walked into the kitchen. He stopped. He was holding something behind his back. "Mum," he said. "Yes?" "I have a gift for you too." "You didn't have to." "I did." He brought his hand out. He was holding a small flat box wrapped in brown paper. Simple, humble. I wiped my hands and took it. I unwrapped the paper. Inside was a frame. It wasn't a photo. It was a drawing. It was a sketch done in charcoal. It showed a woman standing in the snow facing a massive, dark door. But the door wasn't closed. It was transparent. And behind the door, you could see a future. A garden, a community centre, a family reunited. At the bottom, he had written, "To the architect of my life." I looked at it, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not tears of pain, but tears of relief. The burden I had carried, the fear that I had failed him, finally lifted. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "I drew it last night," he said. "I wanted to remember. I never want to forget the door." "Neither do I." I placed the drawing on the mantelpiece next to the photo of his father. "Now," I said, drying my eyes, "let's eat. The cookies are warm." We sat down. The wind howled outside. The snow piled up against the window, but inside the fire was bright. The phone didn't ring. There were no urgent texts. There were no clients to impress. There was just a mother and her son breaking bread. "Merry Christmas, Mum," Jason said, raising his glass of water. "Merry Christmas, Jason." I took a sip. "So," I said, putting the glass down, "about the zoning for the shelter." "I have a friend on the city council." Jason laughed. "You always have a plan, don't you?" "I'm the landlord," I winked. "I always have a plan." Epilogue. The open door. 3 months later. The snow had melted. The crocuses were pushing through the earth. I stood on the sidewalk of Heritage Lane. Number 1422 looked different. The imposing iron gates were gone, replaced by a welcoming wooden fence. The heavy drapes were pulled back, letting the sun stream into the windows. A minivan pulled up. Jason walked out of the house. He was wearing jeans and a tool belt. He looked happy. He walked to the van. A woman stepped out, young, tired, holding a baby. She looked at the massive house with fear in her eyes. She didn't think she belonged there. Jason smiled. He extended his hand. "Welcome," he said. "I'm Jason. Let me help you with your bags." The woman hesitated. Is this really the place?" "Yes," Jason said. "This is the Henderson house." He didn't call it a shelter. He called it a house. "Come on in," he said gently. "It's warm inside." He led her up the steps. He opened the massive oak door, the door that had once been a barrier to his heart. He held it open. He stood back. "After you," he said. The woman walked in. The baby cooed. Jason looked back at the street. He saw me standing there. He nodded, a silent salute. Then he followed the woman inside and left the door wide open. They say that time is a circle. We spend our lives running forward, only to find ourselves back where we started, but with different eyes. It was December 24th again. 2 years exactly since the night the door slammed shut. 1 year since the night the truth broke open. I stood in the library of the Henderson house on Heritage Lane. The room had changed. The leather sofas were worn, not from age, but from use. There were toys scattered on the Persian rug. The silence that used to suffocate this house was gone, replaced by the thrum of life, a baby crying upstairs, the clatter of pots in the kitchen, the sound of a television playing cartoons. It was messy, it was chaotic, it was magnificent. I walked to the window. The snow was falling, heavy and thick, just like that first night. A black car pulled up to the gate. It wasn't a resident. It was a sleek, aggressive sedan. I recognized the driver. It was Beatrice van der Waal, the president of the Homeowners Association. She lived 3 houses down. She had been trying to get our zoning permit revoked for 6 months. I sighed. Even on Christmas Eve, the wolves came knocking. I turned to go handle it, but then I stopped. Jason was already there. He walked out onto the porch. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a festive sweater that was slightly too large and a Santa hat that looked ridiculous on his serious face. He walked down the steps to meet Beatrice at the gate. I stayed behind the curtain. The old Mary would have rushed out to protect him. The new Mary watched. I couldn't hear their words through the double-paned glass, but I could read the body language. Beatrice was pointing at the house. She was gesturing wildly. I knew what she was saying. Property values, noise, undesirable elements, the integrity of the neighbourhood. Jason stood still. He listened. He didn't shrink. He didn't apologise. When she finished her tirade, he smiled. It wasn't the arrogant smirk of the finance bro. It was the patient, disarming smile of a man who knows something you don't. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cookie, one of my butter cookies. He offered it to her. Beatrice froze. She looked at the cookie. She looked at Jason. She looked at the house, glowing with warmth in the twilight. For a moment, the tension hung in the air like ice fog. Then Beatrice took the cookie. Jason said something else. He pointed to the wreath on the gate. He pointed to the sky. Beatrice hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. She got back into her car and drove away. Jason turned and walked back to the house. He saw me in the window. He gave me a thumbs up. I opened the front door as he stomped the snow off his boots. "What did you say to the dragon?" I asked. "She said we were ruining the neighbourhood," Jason laughed, closing the door against the cold. "She said having a shelter here makes her house look bad." "And what did you say?" "I told her that her house looks beautiful," Jason said, "but that our house looks useful. And I asked her if she wanted to come in for hot cocoa. And the cookie, a peace offering. Grandma's recipe works on everyone." I smiled. "You handled it. I learned from the best," he said, hanging up his coat. "Now come on, the party is starting." The party. It wasn't a cocktail party. There was no champagne. There were no investors in Italian suits. The dining room table, the massive mahogany table where Jason had once signed his life away, was covered in a mismatched tablecloth. On it sat a feast. Turkeys donated by the local butcher, casseroles made by the volunteers, and a mountain of mashed potatoes. Around the table sat 12 people. There was Sarah, the young mother I had seen arrive months ago. She was holding her baby, Leo, who was now crawling and causing trouble. There was Mr. Henderson, no relation, an elderly veteran who had lost his apartment when the rent hiked. There was a teenage girl named Maya, a runaway who was finally safe. And there was us. Jason stood at the head of the table. "Attention, everyone," he said, tapping a spoon against a glass of apple cider. The room quieted down. "I just want to say, Merry Christmas," Jason began. His voice was thick with emotion. 2 years ago, I stood in a room like this, surrounded by people who had everything, and I felt completely empty. He looked at Sarah. He looked at Mr. Henderson. He looked at me. Tonight, I look around and I see people who are fighting for everything, and I feel full. He raised his glass. "To the roof over our heads, to the family we choose, and to the landlord," he winked at me, "who keeps the rent at 0. To the landlord," everyone cheered. I raised my glass, my eyes misty. We ate. We laughed. I held baby Leo, while Sarah ate a hot meal with both hands for the first time in weeks. It was the best Christmas dinner of my life. After dinner, the house quieted down. The residents went to their rooms or gathered in the living room to watch a movie. Jason found me in the kitchen. I was washing dishes. I insisted on it. It kept me grounded. "Leave it, Mum," he said. "The volunteers will get it tomorrow." "I like the warm water," I said. "It helps the arthritis." He picked up a towel and started drying. We fell into a rhythm. Wash, dry, stack. I have something for you, I said after a while. Mum, no more gifts. The drawing was enough. This isn't a gift, I said. It's a return. I reached into my pocket. I felt the cool metal. I pulled out the Rolex. It gleamed under the kitchen lights. Time is yours to make. I took his hand. I placed the watch in his palm. You're ready, I said. He looked at the watch. He ran his thumb over the face. Are you sure? You pawned it to buy a house you didn't need, I said. Then you bought it back to prove you had changed, but you haven't worn it. I didn't feel like that guy anymore, he admitted. The guy who needs a Rolex to feel important. You aren't that guy, I said sternly. But this watch isn't about status, Jason. It's about time, and you have used your time well. I closed his fingers over the watch. Wear it, not to show off, but to remember that time is precious, and that you redeemed yours. He didn't argue. He unclasped the band and slipped it onto his wrist. It fit perfectly. Thanks, Mom, he whispered. One more thing, I said. I dried my hands on my apron. We need to talk about the business. Jason tensed slightly. Is something wrong? The open door project. The open door is fine, I said. I'm talking about MH Trust, the empire. What about it? I'm retiring, I said. The plate in his hand slipped. He caught it just in time. Retiring? Mum, you are the business. You can't retire. What would you do? I'm going to travel, I said. Really travel, not just inspecting properties. I want to see the pyramids. I want to take a cooking class in Italy. I want to sit on a beach and read trashy novels. But who will run the trust? I looked at him. I didn't say a word. Me, he squeaked. You, I confirmed. Mum, I'm an architect. I'm running a shelter. I can't manage a $40 million portfolio. You've been managing it for a year, I pointed out. Every decision I made in the last 12 months, I ran by you. Every renovation, every acquisition. You have the instinct, Jason. You have your father's gut and my caution. And now, I touched his chest right over his heart. You have the compassion to make it matter. He stared at me, overwhelmed. It's too much. It's your inheritance, I said. I'm just giving it to you while I'm alive to see you use it. I don't want to be a ghost leaving behind a pile of money. I want to be a witness. I walked over to the kitchen drawer. I pulled out a thick envelope. These are the transfer papers. Finch has them ready. Effective January 1st. You are the CEO of Henderson Holdings. He took the envelope. He held it like it was a bomb. I'll mess it up, he said. I'll make a mistake. You will? I agreed cheerfully. And then you'll fix it. That's what we do. He looked at the envelope, then at the watch on his wrist, then at me. He took a deep breath. He squared his shoulders. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll do it. Good, because my flight to Rome leaves on the 2nd. He laughed. He pulled me into a hug. It was a bear hug, strong and secure. I love you, Mum. I love you too, son. Epilogue. The circle closes 2 years later. I sat at a cafe in Piazza Navona, Rome. The sun was warm on my face. I was drinking an espresso and watching the tourists. My phone buzzed. A video call. I answered it. Jason's face filled the screen. He was wearing a hard hat. He was standing in front of a new construction site. Hey, traveller, he shouted over the noise of a jackhammer. How's Italy? Delicious, I said. I've gained 5 pounds. How is the site? It's going up fast, he said, turning the camera. I saw the steel skeleton of a building. It wasn't a shelter. It was an apartment complex. This is the Affordable Housing Initiative in the South District, Jason narrated. 50 units, solar power, community garden on the roof, and the best part, He pointed the camera at the ground floor. We dedicated the retail space to local businesses only. No chains. The bakery from my old building. They're opening a second branch here. Brilliant, I said. And listen to this, Jason said, turning the camera back to his face. He looked older, wiser, but his eyes shone with joy. I got a letter from Lisa. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? She heard about the shelter and the housing projects. She wrote to say, "Congratulations." That's big of her. She also asked if I wanted to get coffee. Jason smirked. And? I sent her a card, Jason said. I thanked her for the note, and I told her I was busy. Busy doing what? Busy building, he said. He waved at someone off camera. A woman walked into the frame. She was wearing a hard hat too, holding a clipboard. She wasn't glamorous. She had paint on her cheek and a pencil behind her ear. She smiled at the camera. "Hi, Mary," she waved. It was Eleanor, the structural engineer I had hired years ago. "Hi, Eleanor," I smiled. "We're going to be late for the inspection, Jason," she said, touching his arm. "Right, gotta go, Mum," Jason said. "Safe travels. Come home soon. The garden misses you." "I will," I said. "Love you." The screen went black. I sat back in my chair. I looked at the fountain in the centre of the piazza. The water flowed endlessly, recycling itself, always moving, always the same. I thought about the young man who had shut the door in my face. That man was gone, dead and buried under the snow of the past. In his place stood a builder, a partner, a man who understood that the only things you truly own are the things you give away. I paid my check. I left a generous tip for the waiter, a young man who looked a bit like Jason. I stood up and wrapped my scarf around my neck. I walked through the ancient streets of Rome, a woman with no secrets, no heavy burdens, and a heart as light as the air. My story was done, but his was just beginning, and that, I realized with a smile, was the greatest masterpiece I had ever designed.